Chapter 182. When she returned to her room, Hien lay on her bed, tossing and turning restlessly. The window was open, and a little wind came in, blowing her awake. The conversation she had with Xiao Ju was still ringing in her ears. It turned out that on a night she left the He family to join the army, Xiao Ju had actually come to meet her. It was just a freak combination of circumstances that caused them to miss each other. Once they missed each other, there wouldn't be another chance. Just like how Hien didn't know that the person who secretly taught him swordsmanship back then was Xiao Ju, the current Xiao Ju wouldn't know that the person he secretly helped back then had changed. She tried so hard to hide her identity, and so much she wanted to thank him as his classmate back then. It turned out that she and Xiao Ju had so many fateful encounters in both her previous and current lives. It was just that their fates were short, and it just had to happen now. Hien sat up, thought for a while, and got off the bed with determination. She walked to the table and lit the oil lamp with a match. Zhao Shiming was a scholar, and the 4 treasures of the study were placed everywhere in the room. She ground the ink, found a piece of paper, sat down at the table, and started writing slowly. All the matters in the Rendezvous were settled in 3 days. It was also time for Xiao Ju and the others to leave. Before Hien left, she found Zhao Shiming. After the Yi Luo incident, Hien didn't speak to Li Kuang again. Every time she saw Li Kuang, she would think of the sweet girl with dimples on her cheeks when she smiled. She thought that Li Kuang was the same. Every time he bumped into Hien, he would avoid her gaze. So there were some things that she didn't want to mention to Li Kuang. Zhao Shiming was sitting in the room, reading official documents. The Rendezvous was besieged by the Yudo, and the merchants in the city went on strike. Everything was in a mess. Now that the Yudo had been defeated and the Rendezvous had returned to its peaceful state, it would take time to restore its peaceful days. Master Zhao. Hien walked into the room and called out to him. Zhao Shiming raised his head from the documents. Seeing that it was Hien, he paused for a moment, then stood up and said with a warm smile, "Xiao He Darren, what brings you here today?" Zhao Shiming liked Hien very much. He was a scholar, so he couldn't get along with a boorish man like Li Kuang. As for Xiao Ju and Yin He, one was cold while the other was arrogant. Just looking at them made him fearful. Hien, on the other hand, was different. He was young, intelligent, brave, kind, and loyal. He was also handsome and elegant. At first glance, one could tell that he was cultured and likable. If it weren't for the fact that his granddaughter was too young, Zhao Shiming would have wanted to recruit this young man as his grandson-in-law. Hien smiled and said, "Lord Zhao is too polite. I am here to bid farewell to Mr. Zhao. Tomorrow, I will be returning to Shuo Jing with the governor. Thank you for taking care of me during my stay in the Rendezvous." Zhao Shiming liked this young man even more. Look at him, he even specially came to bid farewell to him. He was very polite. He smiled and replied, "Xiao He Darren, please don't say that. You are the benefactor who saved the Rendezvous. This time, I didn't have much to entertain you when I came to the Rendezvous. Instead, I caused Xiao He Darren to suffer a lot. If Xiao He Darren comes to the Rendezvous again in the future, I will definitely treat you well. I hope Xiao He Darren won't hold it against me for being rude this time." Hien supported Zhao Shiming's hand that was about to bow and said, "This junior doesn't dare." He actually addressed him as a junior? Zhao Shiming was stunned. Before he could regain his senses, he saw the young man in front of him looking at him with a solemn expression. "Actually, I came here today to ask for Lord Zhao's help." Zhao Shiming was not unfamiliar with this expression. Previously, when Hien asked his men to help pass a message to Yin he also looked like this. Did he have a favor to ask of him again? Zhao Shiming was very pleased. Hien looked for him instead of Li Kuang. It was clear that he treated him as one of his own. The things that Mu and Lang asked for were usually very easy. It was an honor for him to be able to help. Thinking of this, Zhao Shiming smiled and said, "Xiao He Darren, please feel free to ask. I will definitely do my best." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhao Shiming saw the young man in front of him lift the corner of his robe and kneel down in front of him. "You?" He was shocked. Then, "Thank you very much, Lord Zhao." The servants outside did not know what the people inside were talking about. After a while, when Hien walked out of the door, the servants went in to serve tea. Only then did they see Zhao Shiming slumped in front of the table. He looked absent-minded, and his gaze was unfocused. "Master," the servant called out to him. Zhao Shiming finally regained his senses. He swallowed his saliva and said, "It's nothing, it's nothing." He clenched the letter in his hand tightly. On the other side, Hien walked out of the door and took a deep breath. She did not know whether her decision was right or wrong, but it seemed to be the best way to get Xiao Ju out of the picture. A person walked towards her. She was as delicate and beautiful as a flower. It was Ying Xiang. When Ying Xiang saw Hien, she bowed and greeted Hien He Darren. Now, she did not call Hien young master He. Instead, she called him He Darren. "Miss Ying Xiang," Hien replied. When he saw that she was holding something that looked like clothes in her hands, he could not help but take a second look. Ying Xiang noticed her gaze and smiled. "Fourth young master asked this servant to tidy up a bit. We will be leaving for Shuo capital tomorrow. The weather in Rundu is very good, so the clothes would dry quickly." Returning to Shuo capital, Hien frowned slightly. "You are also leaving tomorrow?" Chu Zhao was originally on his way back to Shuo capital, but he was trapped in the city because of the Yudo's siege. Now that the Yudo had left, they naturally had to leave as well. However, he did not expect that he would be traveling with Xiao Ju. "Yes," Ying Xiang replied with a smile. "Military Governor Xiao also knows that fourth young master is traveling with everyone. There might be other Yudo along the way, so it is better to have more people to take care of each other." Xiao Ju did not want to take care of Chu Zhao. However, since Xiao Ju already knew about this, it was useless for her to say anything more. That day, when Li Kuang wanted to kill the captive women, Chu Zhao also stood up for him. No matter what his goal was, Hien should thank him on the surface. "Help me thank fourth young master for standing on the side of the captive women in front of the army commander that day," Hien said. Ying Xiang's eyes curved in a crescent. "Yes, He Darren." After Hien left, Ying Xiang carried the clothes back into the room. Chu Zhao was standing in front of the window. Ying Xiang packed the clothes into a bag. Her movements were very fast, and in just a moment, everything was packed up. "Fourth young master," Ying Xiang walked to Chu Zhao's side and said in a low voice, "Just now on the road, this servant met Miss He. Miss He asked this servant to thank fourth young master for standing up for the captive women in front of Lord Li." Chu Zhao smiled and did not say anything. After a moment of silence, Ying Xiang said, "Fourth young master should not have done that." Chu Zhao, "Perhaps the Prime Minister's men are in the city. If the Prime Minister sees fourth young master like this, he will not be happy." Su Jingfu was a person who hated others who acted on their own initiative. Since the Rundu incident had nothing to do with him, not only did Chu Zhao speak up, but he also brought up Su Jingfu. Once Su Jingfu knew about this, he would definitely be unhappy with Chu Zhao. "What's done is done. Don't worry." Chu Zhao smiled slightly. "As for the Prime Minister, I will explain it to him." "Why did young master do that?" Ying Xiang asked softly. Even if young master did not do anything, with Missy's ability, no one would be able to make things difficult for her. Chu Zhao did not answer. He only looked at the sky outside the window. Why? It was probably because the way she stood in front of those women reminded him of the time when he was young in the brothel. When someone bullied him, Yi Runmei stood in front of him. In his life, he rarely had anyone to protect him. Other than Yi Runmei, Hien was the only one who could protect him. She protected those women, just like how she protected him in Jian. One person protected another without any selfish motives, without any blood ties, and without any intimate relationship. She just did it because she felt that it was the right thing to do. She was so flamboyant that it made people envious. She was so upright that it made people jealous. She was like a ray of light that even people who were close to her could not help but be illuminated. That was why he stood up at that moment and thought that he was a righteous and brave person. However, he was not a ray of light after all. He was just a shadow. The day to leave the Rundu had arrived. Li Kuang and Zhao Shiming went out of the city to send them off. The southern prefecture soldiers and the Liangzhou guards did not set off with Xiao Ju. They were rushing back to the capital and only brought Yin He's troops with them. The city was bleak. Although there was sunlight, it seemed to be covered with a layer of faint gray. Yin felt sentimental. The last time she left the Rendezvous, she was still Deputy General He. She also chatted and laughed with Li Quan. Now that she was leaving the Rendezvous, the two of them were no longer the same as before. Time flew by quickly. The grapevines in the Rendezvous had already grown into new clumps. A group of people stood at the city gate. Ian was about to get on her horse when she suddenly heard someone's voice behind her. Lord Xiao He. Ian turned her head to look. She saw that many people had gathered in front of the Rendezvous city gate. They did not dare to go forward. They just stood on both sides of the street and looked at them silently. A group of women walked out from the end of the crowd. The one who called out to her was the leader. They were dressed in neat clothes, and there were still scars on their faces that had not yet healed. They were the captives that Yin had rescued from the hands of the Wutuo people during the night attack on the enemy camp. They were also the women that Yin had saved from Li Kuang's sword. Yin still remembered the woman who spoke. That day, she was the one who tearfully persuaded him not to fight with Li Kuang and sacrificed herself willingly. However, Yin later found out from Zhao Shiming that this woman originally lived in a village outside the city. After the Yudo came, he killed her husband and son. She was the only one left in her family. She originally thought that she had been defiled by the Yudo and was afraid of the strange gazes of the people outside. Because her family was not around, she already had the intention to commit suicide. Therefore, when Li Kuang came to find her, she was the first to accept. That day, if Yin did not stand up, if Xiao Ju did not arrive, perhaps these women would have died under Li Kuang's sword. Li Kuang's expression was a little uneasy. There were many things that one did not realize in the current situation. But when things were over and one looked back, one would realize how crazy they were. Those women walked in front of Yin and knelt down. Without saying a word, they kowtowed to Yin a few times. Yin was stunned. "You all, thank you, Lord Xiao He," they said. The women's spirits were much better than before. Perhaps it was the food that Yin brought that filled their stomachs, or perhaps it was the words that he said that day that gave them the courage to live on. Zhao Shiming walked to Yan's side and said in a low voice, "Lord Xiao He, these women, those who still have family members have gone home. Those who are homeless have been placed together by the government. They will work, and in the future, the situation that Lord Xiao He is worried about will not happen." He solemnly promised Yin, "I will take good care of them." Yin was slightly relieved. He bowed to Zhao Shiming. "Thank you, Lord Zhao." Zhao Shiming stroked his beard and smiled. "It's my duty. Since they are from the Rendezvous, as the parent official of the Rendezvous, I should take good care of them." Yin also smiled. There were many things in the world that would change for the better bit by bit. As long as someone did it, change would eventually happen, no matter how small the change was. She helped the leader of the women up and said softly, "Let them get up too. Live well in the future. Remember, I saved your lives. No matter what, don't give up on your lives." The woman nodded, and he stood under the city gate. He crossed his arms and said, "Why does this fellow look more popular than you?" He cast a sidelong glance at Xiao Ju. "Isn't he your subordinate? Why aren't you better than him?" Lin Shuanghe smiled and said, "Brother, he is gentle and amiable. Of course, everyone likes him. There aren't many people in the world who are considerate of others. There are even fewer people who are willing to draw their swords for the sake of other safety." And he couldn't stand Lin Shuanghe's unprofessional behavior. He sneered, "What's wrong with Brother He? Is everyone in the Liang province guard so chaotic?" "Chaotic?" Lin Shuanghe nodded. "They're even more chaotic. It's just that you don't know about it." Ying Xiang stood beside Chu Zhao and quietly watched as the girl bid farewell to the women she saved and boarded the carriage. The citizens of the Rendezvous city and the city guards didn't say anything, but their gazes followed Yin with gratitude. She was indeed a likable girl, whether it was in Jiang or the Rendezvous. "Let's go." Chu Zhao turned around and boarded his own carriage. The city gates opened and the soldiers and horses marched. The sunlight shone on the end of the long road. It was like a bright road that led to the future. It took 10 days to reach Jinling from the Rendezvous city. After passing Jinling city, they went straight to Shuo capital. The soldiers and horses that were hurrying on their way sat down and rested in the bushes. Lin Shuanghe was watching Hien roasting eggs. He was a pampered young master who didn't do any household chores. Naturally, he couldn't do such rough chores. Hien knew how to cook too, but he saw that the fish he roasted was so black that it was hard to eat. Later on, he decided to do it himself. Xiao Ju was talking to Qi Wu on the other side. Hien and Lin Shuanghe sat together. Lin Shuanghe watched her skillful movements and sighed. Brother He, you're really good at everything. You can climb over walls and beat hooligans. I've seen so many. He lowered his voice. None of the women can compare to you. Really, sister, when you reach Shuo capital, you'll still be #1 in my heart. Hien threw the roasted eggs into his arms. You flatter me. Lin Shuanghe hurriedly peeled the shells and asked her, when we reach Shuo capital, what do you want to do? There's nothing in Liangzhou. Shuo capital is prosperous. If you have time, I'll take you to the market every day. What kind of situation was this? This person still wanted to play. Hien was speechless for a moment. She thought of another matter and asked Lin Shuanghe, "Oh right, why didn't Dr. Shin come with you to Runde this time? She should be going back to Shuo capital." When Hien left the Liangzhou guards, she sealed Shun Mushue's acupoints. Although it was to protect her, she wasn't sure what happened to Shun Mushue after that. This time, Xiao Ju, Yin He, and Lin Shuanghe came, but they didn't see Shun Mushue. However, Xiao Ju was going back to Shuo capital. Shun Mushue had no reason to stay in the Liangzhou guards alone. Dr. Shun, Lin Shuanghe answered matter-of-factly, she's a girl. When Huaijin and I rushed to the Rendezvous, we didn't rest day and night. How could she stand this? If we bring her along, I'm afraid that she'll slow us down. So it's better not to bring her along. As for the medical officer, I alone am enough. Huaijin asked Shun Han and the others to bring Dr. Shun over later. Hien nodded. In the next moment, Lin Shuanghe's face suddenly came close and looked at her mischievously. Why did you mention Dr. Shun alone? Are you jealous? Jealous? Jealous of what? Hien was so scared that she almost smashed his head with the tree branch. Hearing this, she just sat up straight and calmly said, I sealed her acupoints before I left. I just feel guilty. Is that really the case? Lin Shuanghe deliberately dragged out his words. If that's the case, then Huaijin's painstaking efforts will be in vain. Hien, what painstaking efforts? Lin Shuanghe stuffed an egg into his mouth and said slowly, You won't care even if I tell you. It's better not to tell you. Hien was so anxious that she wanted to grab Lin Shuanghe's head and shake it with all her might to see what it was that was shaking out. However, Lin Shuanghe was a cunning person when it came to matters between men and women. Moreover, he was close to Xiao Ju. If he really got some confirmation and turned around to tell Xiao Ju, they wouldn't even be friends. That would be extremely awkward. She could only sit there reservedly. Even though her heart was pounding, her expression was calm and indifferent. Then I really don't care. Just don't say it. Lin Shuanghe looked at her pretentious appearance and tried his best to hold back his laughter. He thought to himself, let's see how long you can hold back. Young people. Young people. Thousands of miles away in Liangzhou, the guard station was busy at this moment. Liang Ping was helping to check if there was anything missing in the room. They were about to leave for Shuajing. A portion of the Liangzhou guard was left behind, and the rest were going to the capital. Shen Han was going to leave with them. Liang Ping, Ma Damei, and the other instructors were going to stay at the Liangzhou guard. Shen Mushue was naturally going to leave as well. Many days ago, when Xiao Ju and Lin Shuanghe were about to leave for the Rendezvous, Shen Mushue had asked to go with them. However, he was rejected by Xiao Ju. His rejection was very straightforward, and she didn't say why. However, when Lin Shuanghe saw Shun Mushue's ugly expression, he tried to smooth things over with a smile. Miss Shun, the situation in the Rendezvous is critical. Huaijin and I will be traveling day and night. How can a girl like you follow us? If you get hurt, even if you don't mind, I won't be able to bear it. In any case, Shun Jiaodo and the others will leave in the future. When you come back together, Shun Jiaodo will take good care of you. The speed of soldiers and horses is slow, and there are many of them. Huaijin and I will be relieved to protect you. Isn't that right? Shen Mushue didn't say anything. Lin Shuanghe took it as a silent agreement and turned to leave with a smile. Shen Muxue looked at his back and asked, "Young Master Lin, second young Master Xiao, is going to the Rendezvous for Hien, right?" Lin Shuanghe paused and looked at her. His gaze was sincere and puzzled. "Why would you think that?" Shen Muxue pursed her lips and didn't say anything. She knew that it was ridiculous to say this. Xiao Ju wasn't someone who would easily change for someone, but she still felt uneasy. The sound from outside interrupted her memories. Liang Ping called out to her, "Dr. Shun, is there anything else you want to carry on to the carriage?" Shen Muxue came back to her senses and answered as she walked out the door. Liang Ping stood outside. The sun shone on his face and made his face red. He was sweating profusely. He was holding a stack of boxes in his hands and was walking unsteadily towards the carriage. Xiao Ju left in a hurry and didn't pack his things. Before he left, he instructed Shen Han to take everything in his room with him when he returned to Shuajing. Fortunately, Xiao Ju didn't have many things with him. Other than some clothes, there wasn't much left. Shen Muxue saw that Liang Ping was walking unsteadily, so she stepped forward and said, "Let me help you." Liang Ping's face turned even redder. "No need, no need. The chief instructor told me that these things belong to the governor and asked me to organize them myself. How can I trouble Dr. Shen?" He sighed in his heart. Miss Shen was really kind-hearted and didn't put on airs. As the daughter of a big family, she didn't despise martial artists like him. Shen Muxue didn't know what Liang Ping was thinking. He only heard that these things belonged to Xiao Ju and said, "You're carrying so many things at once. It's inevitable that you'll drop them. Don't worry, I'll help you." As he spoke, he helped carry the topmost box. The box wasn't big. He walked forward with Liang Ping. Liang Ping wanted to stop him, but it was too late. Seeing that Shen Muxue didn't seem to be struggling, he relaxed a little. He smiled, "Thank you, Dr. Shen." The two of them walked to the side of the carriage. Liang Ping let Shen Muxue get on the carriage first. He would go and carry the boxes himself. It was hot outside. Shen Muxue nodded in agreement. She sat quietly with the box in her hands and looked at the busy soldiers in the distance. Her gaze fell on the box in her arms. The box looked ordinary. She didn't know what was inside. Xiao Ju didn't bring many things with him. Since Shen Han wanted to bring them back to Shuo capital, it must be very important. However, she picked up the box and waited. It was too light, as if it didn't contain anything. Could it be empty? It was rare for her to be curious. It shouldn't be Xiao Ju's official documents or letters. He would only carry these things with him. If she opened it, it shouldn't be a problem, right? Shen Muxue's fingers rested on the box. She looked outside the carriage. The soldiers were far away, so no one saw her movements. With a click, the box was opened. There were some brushes, inkstones, paperweights, and the like inside. It was just a small thing. She was about to close it when her gaze suddenly froze. After a while, she reached out and took out two things. One was a dough figurine. The dough had already dried, and the color was dark. It was a woman with a charming smile. The other was a wooden carving. In the carving, a warship was capsized and the fire was fierce. The general standing at the bow of the ship was valiant and valiant. It was a female general. Chapter 183. 10 days later, the group arrived at Jinling. It was different from Jiang's warmth and simplicity, and it was also different from Rundu's solemnity and bleakness. Jinling's city was gentle and affectionate, like a beautiful and elegant lady, stained with a thin layer of pink. The sunlight was clear, the morning sun was romantic, and the soft language of Wunong was filled with music. It was truly a rich and noble village in the human world. Lin Shuanghe couldn't walk as soon as he arrived. He could only look at the delicate lady walking on the street and praise, "This is the immortal cave." No wonder people always say that once you enter Jinling, you don't want to leave. Hien, you said the same thing when you were in Jiang. Lin Shuanghe opened his fan. "Brother He, I'm just doing as the Romans do when in Rome." Hien, what a good. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. When they arrived at Jinling, they naturally had to greet the governor of Jinling's Yingtian prefecture. It wasn't convenient for Yan He's troops to move around freely in the city. Yingtian Prefecture had already received the news of Yan He's arrival, so Yan He also went to Yingtian Prefecture to receive them first so that he could settle the troops down. Outside Yingtian Prefecture, the imperial bodyguards were already waiting outside. There were already people arranged to settle the troops down. Yan was supposed to stand with Wang Ba and the others in the troops team. However, Lin Shuanghe patted her shoulder. "You're now Mu and Lang, personally appointed by His Majesty. You're no longer a commoner. Of course, you should be with us. It's a good opportunity to show you the world of officialdom." Yan was speechless. Just as he was about to ask Xiao Ju, Yan He glanced at her and said, "You're right. Since you have an official position, you should follow us." Yan He was someone who had his eyes on top of his head and was very difficult to get along with. However, he treated Yan differently. Others were a little surprised, but Yan was well aware that this was all thanks to him degrading He Rufei in front of Yan He, making him feel that he was a rare soulmate in the world. Everyone entered the room together. There was a person sitting in the main hall. When he saw them enter, he stood up. He was wearing the robes of an inspector general. This person was very young and thin. His facial features were delicate and had a hint of determination. He did not look like an inspector general. Instead, he looked like a student of the Imperial College. He stood up and bowed to Yan He. "General Yan." Then, his gaze fell on Xiao Ju, and he was immediately shocked. However, this shock was fleeting and soon turned into shock. Yan was also shocked. He did not expect to meet Yang Mingji here. What kind of coincidence was this? One Xiao Ju, one Lin Shuanghe, one Yan He, and one Yang Mingji. They were her classmates in Xianchang Gymnasium. She actually met 4 of them here. This was too unbelievable. However, Yan raised his eyes and secretly glanced at Xiao Ju. When they were studying, wasn't Xiao Ju and Yang Mingji the closest? Yan had received help from Xiao Ju when he was young. However, on the surface, he was not close to Xiao Ju. At that time, Xiao Ju also had her own good friends. Lin Shuanghe was one, and Yang Mingji was another. Compared to Lin Shuanghe, who did not do proper work and only knew how to play, Yang Mingji was much more serious. Yang Mingji's father, Master Yang, was a scholar in Guanwen Palace. Yang Mingji was very talented when he was young, probably because of his father. However, his health was not good. Every few days, he would have headaches and fevers. Hence, his martial sciences were a mess. However, the teachers and other youths would not laugh at him because of this. In the humanities, Yang Mingji was really amazing. It was said that he could speak eloquently at the age of 5. At the age of 8, he could discuss the classics with famous scholars from Dawei. When Yan entered Xianchang Gymnasium, Yang Mingji was already very famous. His political theory and poetry were the best. He also had good handwriting. Yan was very envious. He was also very gentle. He was not as lively as Lin Shuanghe, nor as indifferent as Xiao Ju. His gentleness was just right. In Xianchang Gymnasium, if Yan He was always competing with Xiao Ju in the martial sciences, then Yang Mingji would be on par with Xiao Ju in the humanities. Unlike his gentle temperament, Yang Mingji's political theory and poetry always had a bit of sharpness. It was enough to see his inner pride. He also liked to criticize current affairs. When he was in the mood, he even dared to criticize the imperial court in his articles. He was often scolded by the teachers, but Yan could see that the teachers admired him. When he was young, Yan always thought that a genius like Yang Mingji would definitely enter the government service. Once he did, he would definitely leave a deep mark into Wei's history books. However, after she joined the army, she did not hear any news about Yang Mingji. She never expected to see him here today. She also never expected that Yang Mingji would become the governor of Jinling. He did not stay in Shuajing. Why was that? And Xiao Ju's expression was also indifferent when she saw him. This was very strange. Xiao Ju's relationship with Yang Mingji was like her relationship with Lin Shuanghe. But now, when they met, they were so distant that they seemed like strangers. Yan was not the only one who noticed this. And he also noticed this. And he said, "Hey, isn't this Brother Mingji? How did you become the governor here?" And he did not know either. It seemed that Yang Mingji had been very low-key all these years. Yang Mingji came back to his senses and smiled at Yin. It was just a coincidence. Xiao Huijin, this is your good friend from the past. Why are you so cold? Yin's gaze moved between the two of them. Did you two have a fight? He asked this casually, as if he was still a teenager. However, Yang Mingji's expression changed slightly. If you want to talk about the past, you can talk about it in the future. Now is not the time to talk about the past. Lin Shuanghe cut in at the right time and changed the topic. That, Yang? Sir, we will be stopping in Jinling for 2 days. Please help us settle down. In his troops, you could do as you see fit. After resting for 2 days, we will return to the capital. Lin Shuanghe's attitude was also very strange. Even though Xiao Ju was a person who did not show her emotions, Lin Shuanghe was a shrewd person. However, looking at his current attitude towards Yang Mingji, it was as if he was deliberately drawing a clear line between them. There was no longer the friendliness from before. There was no need to mention Chu Zhao. He had already seen through the undercurrent. No matter how careless Yin he was, he also realized that something was wrong. This time, he didn't say it out loud. Instead, he kept his mouth shut. Yang Mingji's smile was a bit stiff. Of course, the rooms have already been tidied up. I will ask someone to bring you there later. Lin Shuanghe closed his fan. Thank you, Sir Yang. Not long after, a few servant girls came and led Yin and the others to the place where they would be staying. The place they would be staying was not in the governor's manor. It was a residence not far from the Qinhuai River in Jinling. Perhaps it was under Yang Mingji's name. The house had already been tidied up. The rooms were just right, one for each person. Chu Zhao also got a room. He did not talk much with Yin along the way. He seemed to be silent and quiet. Sometimes, he did not know what he was thinking. This saved Yin a lot of trouble. Xiaoju also did not argue with him. They were at peace for the time being. Yin's room was the most remote one. In this group of people, her position was the lowest, so this arrangement was understandable. However, Lin Shuanghe jumped out and said to her, Brother I saw ants in the room I was staying in just now. I'm scared. Can I change rooms with you? Yin, she said, they're all in one place. If you have them in your room, then I will also have them in my room. But I'm only scared of the ants in my room. He answered very cleverly. Yin who heard their conversation, frowned. Lin Shuanghe, are you crazy? Yes. Lin Shuanghe smiled and asked, Do you have medicine? Yin left in a huff. Chu Zhao looked at Yin thoughtfully. He shook his head and smiled. Then, he followed Ying Xiang into his room. Yin stared at Lin Shuanghe, who was laughing happily in front of her. She could tell at a glance what Lin Shuanghe was up to. Lin Shuanghe's room was right next to Xiao Ju's. He was pushing her to Xiao Ju's side. Only the heavens knew that she had just made up her mind to stay away from Xiao Ju. She looked up and saw Xiao Ju turn her head to look at her. She was speechless for a moment. Lin Shuanghe said, then it settled. Brother I'm leaving. He quickly hugged his bag and rushed into Yin's room. Yin had no choice but to brace herself and walk into Lin Shuanghe's room. Yin let out a sigh of relief when the door closed. She knew that this wasn't the Liang province guard, and the 2 rooms didn't have doors that could be opened easily. However, she still felt a bit nervous. She cursed herself in her heart. When she was in Jiang City, she had slept in the same room in Cui Yu's residence. What was there to be nervous about? Now, there was a wall between them. Could it be that she could fly? Thinking of this, she relaxed a bit. However, she was still thinking about how unusual Xiao Ju's meeting with Yang Mingji just now. She felt that it was a bit strange. After a while, she slipped out of the door again. Seeing that there was no one around, she knocked on Lin Shuanghe's door. Lin Shuanghe yawned as he opened the door. When he saw that it was Yin, he immediately grabbed the door frame tightly. Brother you have to keep your word. We've already switched rooms, so we definitely can't switch back. I won't leave even if I die. He thought that Yin was here to switch rooms. Yin said helplessly, I'm not here to switch rooms. I have something to ask you. That's even more unacceptable. Lin Shuanghe said seriously, I'm a gentleman. We're a single man. If some people see this, wouldn't it be a big problem? What nonsense was he spouting? Yin couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him. He pushed him into the room and followed in, closing the door behind him. Lin Xuanghe was pushed into a chair by He Yan. He covered his chest with both hands and said forcefully, "Sister He, you can't play with your friend's wife. I'm not that kind of person. I'm asking about Yang Mingji." He Yan interrupted him. Lin Xuanghe was stunned. Then, he turned pale with fright. "You've taken a liking to Yang Mingji? Why was there only love in this person's heart?" He Yan took a deep breath. "It's not that I've taken a liking to him. I just want to ask you if anything happened between Official Yang and the governor. Previously, I heard Generals Yan say that Official Yang is a good friend of the governor. However, when I was outside, I saw that the two of them didn't look like good friends." After saying this in one breath, Lin Xuanghe finally understood the purpose of He Yan's visit. He was stunned for a while. Then, he slowly sat up straight. A worried expression appeared on his usually cheerful face. He sighed and said, "So you've noticed?" He Yan asked, "But did something happen between them?" Actually, Yin Nangguang, Huaijin, and Yang Mingji were classmates. Lin Xuanghe put down the fan in his hand and picked up the teapot beside him. He poured a cup of tea and handed it to He Yan before pouring another cup for himself. He stared at the tea in the teacup, as if he was reminiscing about the past. His voice was light as he said, "Yin Nangguang is like a fighting cock. He's always competing with this and that. He's not close to us. Back in the day, Huaijin and Yang Mingji and I were best friends. Speaking of which, Yang Mingji and Huaijin should be closer than Huaijin and I were." There wasn't the slightest hint of jealousy or dissatisfaction on his face. He only smiled and said, "After all, I'm not good at both civil and military affairs. With Huaijin, I can only talk about which family's girls are prettier and which restaurant's dishes are newer. Yang Mingji and Huaijin can always talk more than I can. Yang Mingji's health isn't good. When he was young, people secretly said that he was a sissy. Later, when Huaijin took him along, no one dared to say that." He knew all of this. At that time, she thought that talented people were often similar to talented people. Xiao Zhu and Yang Mingji were both outstanding. No wonder they could become close friends. "And then," she asked, "and then," Lin Xuanghe lowered his head. His gaze gradually became sad and frustrated. In the year of the Xiao family's accident, the situation in the imperial court was very tense. Xiao Zhongwu died and also bore the crime of incompetent command in the Battle of Mingshui. The Xiao family's collapse was imminent. Prime Minister Su's power in the imperial court became more and more rampant. Although the students in the Xianchang school were all from rich and powerful families, no one dared to speak up for the Xiao family in the teeth of the storm, except for Lin Xuanghe. His family practiced medicine in the imperial court. Lin Xingtan and Lin Mu didn't care about the matters of the imperial court. Lin Xuanghe had no intention of becoming an official. After learning that the Xiao family had an accident, Lin Xuanghe begged his father and grandfather to say good words for Xiao Zhongwu in front of the emperor. Lin Mu really did say it. His skill in women's medicine was superb. He was also very tactful. Many concubines in the imperial harem had a good relationship with him. Lin Mu picked a few concubines to talk to the emperor for a few days. He didn't mention Xiao Zhongwu's matter. He only said that the two young masters of the Xiao family were pitiful. They were both young talents, but something happened in the Fu. The emperor was also a person who took pity on talents. He was also soft-hearted. As he talked, he really felt that Xiao Jing and Xiao Zhu were pitiful. The crime of the Battle of Mingshui was only focused on Xiao Zhongwu. The Xiao family was not implicated. But just this was not enough. The military power of the South Fu army had not been taken back. Even if the emperor didn't punish the other members of the Xiao family because of old friendship, the Xiao family without military power was like a piece of fatty meat without the protection of weapons. As long as others wanted to, they could come up and take a bite. They were not Prime Minister Su's opponent. The emperor's mercy would only fade as Xiao Zhongwu died. If they wanted to take back military power, they could only start now. It would not work if they were late. And in the imperial court, except for Xiao Zhongwu's former subordinates and imperial censor Shun, no one dared to speak. In the Xianchangwan, Xiao Zhu only had two close friends. One was Lin Xuanghe, the other was Yang Mingji. Lin Xuanghe begged his father to speak for Xiao Zhu. Yang Mingji's father, Yang Daren, was the scholar of Guanwen Palace Hall. He was once the emperor's hand-picked scholar. Emperor Wen Xian liked him very much. If Yang Daren spoke, the emperor might listen. Xiao Ju asked Yang Mingji for help. Lin Xuanghe still remembered what Yang Mingji said at that time. His eyes were full of anxiety. He patted Xiao Ju's shoulder and said, "Don't worry. I will definitely persuade my father to speak for General Xiao in the imperial court." I asked the emperor to thoroughly investigate the inside story of the Battle of Mingshui. Huaijin, don't worry. Brother Lin and I will always be with you. He was gentle and weak, but his words were powerful. Lin Xuanghe never doubted Yang Mingji's sincerity at that moment. Thinking about it, Xiao Ju also felt the same. So they waited for Yang Mingji's news. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Yang Mingji did not come to the Xianchangwan. He only said that he was sick. Lin Xuanghe and Xiao Ju suspected that Yang Mingji could not leave the residence, or that he was locked up at home. They did not suspect anything else. So after some discussion, the two disguised themselves as servants and sneaked into the Yang residence to find Yang Mingji. At that time, Yang Mingji was practicing calligraphy in his room. There was no lock on the door, no house arrest, and he was not even sick. He looked the same as before. Because he was not as tired at home as he was at school, his complexion was even better. "Mingji," Lin Xuanghe looked at him in surprise. "Why didn't you go to the school?" "Huaijin, and I thought something had happened to you." Yang Mingji stood up and looked at them. More accurately, he looked at Xiao Ju. He did not speak. Xiao Ju seemed to understand something and said, "Your father..." "Sorry." Yang Mingji did not wait for Xiao Ju to finish speaking before interrupting him. "I have broken my promise to you before. My father cannot speak for General Xiao." "Why?" Lin Xuanghe was anxious. "Didn't we agree?" "It's fine," Xiao Ju spoke. He lowered his eyes and said, "I forced you to do this. You don't need to apologize." Lin Xuanghe did not speak. He knew how difficult it was to ask for an explanation at this time. He should not have blamed Yang Mingji. However, the greater the hope, the harder it was to bear the disappointment. He looked at the person in front of him and asked in confusion, "Because of this, did the governor and Governor Yang break off their relationship?" Perhaps it was not that Governor Yang did not work hard for this matter, but because Scholar Yang was unwilling to let it go, he did not succeed. She did not believe that Yang Mingji was a cold-blooded and heartless person, because Yang Mingji was actually very kind and amiable. When he was at Xianchangwan, he did not receive much kindness from the youths. Yang Mingji was definitely one of them. Moreover, a person who is passionate about poetry and policy should be especially righteous and passionate. Lin Xuanghe did not immediately answer her question. He was silent. After a while, he said, "I thought the same that day. Perhaps Yang Mingji had some difficulties." And then before we left, Yang Mingji said something. His voice was slightly uneven, and the shadow of the past appeared in front of his eyes. Yang Mingji stopped the two people who were about to leave and said, "Huaijin, have you ever thought that perhaps there was no inside story behind the Battle of Mingshui, and that it was because of General Xiao?" Xiao Ju had already walked to the door. Hearing this, he turned his head. The youth's expression was calm, and the outline of his face was as beautiful as a painting. He did not speak. He just walked to Yang Mingji's side and threw a punch. That punch was really ruthless. Lin Xuanghe hissed and gloated. Yang Mingji's health was not good. He was beaten to the point that he had to lie in bed for half a month. Lord Yang was so angry that he almost wrote a memorial, but in the end he did not. Perhaps he felt sorry for Huaijin. But it was useless. Lin Xuanghe sighed slightly. Not long after that, Huaijin went to the palace to ask for an order. He took 3,000 people to Guis City and became famous after that battle. Chapter 184. He did not expect that there was such a thing between Yang Mingji and Xiao Ju. After listening to Lin Xuanghe, he thought for a while. Indeed, Yang Mingji's last words were too hurtful. But why would he do that for no reason? If he did not want to help, then he did not want to help. Why did he have to stab people in the heart like that? Moreover, With Yang Mingji's original personality, he would not be so sharp and mean. If Yin thought this way, as Yang Mingji's former good friend, Xiao Ju should have thought of this. Yin asked, "What happened after that? Did the governor not contact Sir Yang anymore? Was there any misunderstanding?" Lin Shuanghe shook his head. After Huaijin led the troops to Gua City, he rarely returned to the capital. However, not long after Huaijin left, Yang Mingji stopped studying at the Xianchang school. Originally, with his talent, I thought that he would be the top scholar and stay in the capital. With his father's relationship and his own ability, it would not be difficult. However, since then, he seemed to have disappeared without a trace. We are all brothers. He was indeed in the wrong about Huaijin. After that, I stopped contacting him. Therefore, I don't know when he became the governor of Jinling City. It seemed that these brothers had really parted ways. Yin thought to himself. At this moment, there was a knock on the door, followed by Yin He's impatient urging, "Lin Shuanghe, open the door." Lin Shuanghe got up and walked to the door to open it. As soon as he opened the door, he saw Yin He standing at the door. Lin Shuanghe smiled. "Generals Yin, may I know why you're looking for me at such a late hour?" Yin He was about to speak when he saw Yin in the room. He asked suspiciously, "Why is he in your room?" "I'm here to see if there are any ants," Yin said. "If there are, I can chase them away for Brother Lin." Yes, Lin Shuanghe said seriously. "I invited her here to drive the ants away. Don't randomly suspect my relationship with her." "What nonsense!" Yin He frowned. "Hurry up and change your clothes and follow us." "Where are we going?" Lin Shuanghe was baffled. Yin He coughed lightly. "I'll get someone to tell Yang Mingji that we'll be going to the Qinhuai River for a cruise tonight. As a local governor, he should naturally prepare hospitality for us. Quickly change your clothes and inform Xiao Huaijin." No one had expected Yin He's actions. Lin Shuanghe was dumbfounded. He asked, "Why do we need a cruise?" With Yang Mingji and Xiao Huaijin's appearance, who are they trying to fool? Yin He said proudly, "I can tell a glance. I'm kind-hearted today and am willing to be a bridge for them. Xiao Huaijin won't come to Jinling every day. If they spend more time together, the misunderstanding will naturally be resolved." He played with the ends of his ponytail. "These years, I've been running around outside, so I've learned a lot about the secular world. For example, Xiao Huaijin's personality is not likable. It's impossible for him to resolve the misunderstanding between Yang Mingji and himself. Yang Mingji isn't that annoying. I'm not doing this for Xiao Huaijin. I'm only doing this for Yang Mingji." Seeing that Lin Shuanghe didn't say anything, Yin He raised his chin. "How is it? Do you think I'm very magnanimous? Hurry up and thank me for your close friend." Lin Shuanghe, "I really have to thank you." Yin He was truly a talent. Yin sighed in his heart. He was always able to accurately step into Xiao Ju's forbidden area. No wonder the two of them didn't see eye to eye when they were in the Xianchang mansion. "No need to thank me," Yin He said carelessly. "I'll go and tell Chu Xilan." "Wait," Lin Shuanghe asked. "It's fine if it's Yang Mingji, but why do you have to ask Chu Xilan too? We're all staying here. If he's the only one left, it'll make me look petty. Moreover, as an official, you have to be more tactful. Do you think you're very powerful if you fight like a cockfight?" Yin He sneered. "Oh, I forgot. You're not an official, so naturally you don't know these things." He patted Lin Shuanghe's shoulder and walked towards Chu Zhao's courtyard. Lin Shuanghe and Yin looked at each other, speechless. As expected of Yin He pulled in two enemies at once. Yang Mingji wasn't counted. If Chu Zhao was added, Xiao Ju would probably be angered to death. She might not even follow them. "Sister Lin Shuanghe said, why don't you go and tell Huaijin? Yin, let's go together." This was going to cost her life. How could she bear it alone? The two of them dragged their feet and struggled for a moment. Finally, they went to Xiao Ju's room and explained what Yin He said. They thought that Xiao Ju would definitely not follow them. Unexpectedly, she turned around and said, "Okay." At this moment, Yin and Lin Shuanghe were both shocked. She actually agreed just like that, and her expression was so calm. Lin Shuanghe whispered to Yin, "He won't wait until we get on the boat and fight with Yang Mingji, right? That's too undignified." "Yin, it's very possible," Xiao Ju raised her eyebrows slightly. You're not going? Yes, 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 of course we're going. Lin Shuanghe moved closer to Hian's ear and whispered, You have to go. If they fight, remember to stop them. Hian was speechless. After they agreed, they went back to their rooms to change their clothes. They were travel-worn from their journey. Now that they were in Jinling, if they dressed like they were in a hurry to get on the boat, they would look out of place. Hian asked someone to fetch some water. After he took a bath, he changed into a new set of clothes. When they left Rendezvous, the citizens sent them off with a lot of food and clothes. The material wasn't very expensive, but it was very fitting. Hian looked at himself in the mirror. The youth was wearing a green shirt and cloth boots. His hair was tied into a simple bun, and he had delicate features. He didn't look any different from the students in the Xianchang school in his previous life. She seemed to have grown a bit taller than when she first arrived at the Liangzhou guards. Standing in the room, she was as tall and straight as a poplar tree, young and full of vitality. After Hian finished tidying up, he pushed open the door and walked out. As soon as he walked out, he found that everyone had already finished tidying up and was waiting for him outside. And he impatiently said, You're just a little Muan Lang. Why are you so troublesome? There are so many people waiting for you. Are you putting on makeup inside? Hian thought to himself, What a coincidence. She really was putting on makeup inside. A girl pretending to be a man also needed to put in a lot of effort. Xiao Ju glanced at him and smiled slightly. Let's go. The residence that Yang Mingji arranged for them wasn't far from the Qinhuai River. As a result, they didn't take a carriage and walk towards the Qinhuai River on their own. Their group was made up of either handsome youths or handsome men. They were particularly eye-catching as they walked on the streets. From time to time, there would be bold girls who pretended to sprain their ankles and lean forward. However, Xiao Ju didn't like to come into contact with people, so he naturally avoided them. And he wasn't the type to have tender feelings for the fairer sex. He already left some leeway by not reprimanding or punishing them. Chu Zhao had a beautiful servant girl by his side, so those girls were treated. In the end, the ones who suffered were Lin Shuanghe and Hian. Hian couldn't remember how many beautiful girls he had helped. It was just that those girls looked at him with tender gazes that made it hard for him to resist. For a moment, he felt that it was better to be as innocent and cute as Song Tao Dao. Lin Shuanghe was the same. He didn't know how many times he called Mimi. Yet he looked at the two of them with schadenfreude and said to Lin Shuanghe, after so many years, I didn't expect you to still be so popular with women. Lin Shuanghe tidied his slightly wrinkled robe and smiled slightly. Of course, just like how you're always disliked by women. And he snorted, I already have a wife. I don't need to be liked by others. He instilled and looked at General Yin. General Yin is already married? When he said this, Xiao Ju and Chu Zhao both looked at Hian. Lin Shuanghe opened his fan. You didn't expect this, right? Our General Yin is still young. It's a pity that he got married at such a young age. I think you were jealous. Yin he sneered. Hian was a little strange. She rarely interacted with her schoolmates in the Xianchang gymnasium after she joined the army. She didn't know when Yin he got married. Although it was understandable for Yin he to get married at his age, it was hard to imagine what he would be like as a husband with his arrogant and egotistical temperament that was similar to a fighting cock. It was also at this moment that Hian truly felt that the youngsters back then had all grown up. When they were talking, they had already arrived at the Qinhuai River. A few manservants were waiting by the river. When they saw Hian and the others, they went forward and said, Military Governor Xiao, General Yin, the governor has already prepared a boat and is waiting on the boat. Actually, with the Yang family's background, Yang Mingji didn't need to do this. This attitude was already very humble. However, in this group of people, his close friends had already become estranged from him. The only one left was Yin He, who had good intentions but did not know how to speak. Chu Zhao and Yang Mingji weren't too familiar. Hian had even changed his shell. Therefore, when the group of people boarded the boat, they already sensed Yang Mingji's awkwardness. Yang Mingji had already taken off his governor robe and changed into a sandalwood-colored long gown. Although he was an official, his face didn't have the slightest worldly aura of an official. Standing here, he was even more restrained and had the arrogance of a young man. Yin felt as if he had returned to the Xianchang gymnasium. Yang Mingji was still the Yang Mingji of the past. Yin he patted Yang Mingji's shoulder and walked to the bow of the boat to take a look, saying, "You really know how to enjoy life. You picked such a good place like Jinling. Little did you know that a few days ago, we were fighting in the Rendezvous, not far from your Jinling. That was hell on earth. They already ate people." Yang Mingji was stunned. Really? Then, a hint of anger appeared in his eyes. He moved his lips as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. Yudo did evil in Jiang and Rendezvous Huayuan, but Jinling City was not affected at all. It was still peaceful. On the Qinhuai River, many pleasure boats and pleasure boats flowed down the river. The sound of stringed instruments floated leisurely on the surface of the water. The shore was brightly lit, and the flowers were like brocade. Ian sat in the boat and looked out through the window. The water was almost illuminated by the lanterns and fishing fires on the boats. It was as if it was truly a peaceful and prosperous time. This place was different from Jiang. The boats in Jiang were small, the water market was lively, and the women in Jiang were bold and simple. Jinling, on the other hand, was like an old dream. Among the boats and lanterns, the beautiful scenery was full of spring. He didn't know which boat it came from, but the sound of a pipa could be heard. The sound of the pipa was like pearls falling on a jade plate. It made people's thoughts wander. Lin Shuanghe stood at the bow of the boat and said with a smile, "Jinling City is exactly the same as it was many years ago. The boats, the water, and the pipa sound are all the same." When Ning Xiang heard this, she asked curiously, "Young Master Lin, have you been to Jinling before?" "Of course." Lin Shuanghe spread his fan and said, "Speaking of which, I wasn't the only one who came to Jinling last time. Brother Yin, Huaijin, Master Yang, right?" He then looked at He Yin, who was looking at the scenery on the water, and said, "Brother this should be your first time in Jinling, right? What do you think?" He Yin nodded. "It's very beautiful." She thought that this was not her first time in Jinling. Just as Lin Shuang has said, the last time she came to Jinling, she was also on the boat. That was a summer day in the Xianchang Gymnasium, just like the current season. There was a poetry gathering in Jinling City, and famous scholars from Dowei were invited. This was the first time in 10 years, and the opportunity was hard to find. The teachers of the Xianchang Gymnasium wanted to let the youths see the world, so they picked the 10 best youths in the scholarly arts and received invitations to the poetry gathering. Of course, Hien didn't receive an invitation. Although her scholarly arts were a bit better than her martial arts, she still couldn't reach the top 10. However, Hien didn't have much interest in leaving the capital and going to Jinling. Wearing a mask was very inconvenient. Moreover, she had to interact with those youths day and night. It was hard to even find a time to avoid them, so it was better if she didn't go. Thinking of this, she didn't have much regret. That day, Hien studied for a while after school as usual. The sun was about to set. She estimated that there was still some food left in the kitchen, so she got up and walked to the kitchen. The Xianchang Gymnasium wouldn't embezzle the students' food. Whenever she went to the kitchen, there would always be some pastries and food. Hien had just walked to the kitchen when she saw that the door to the firewood room was ajar. She had just walked to the door when she heard a youth's excited voice coming from inside. "Brother Lin's suggestion is good. Since we're going to Jinling, why don't we go to Ru Yun Lu to broaden our horizons? I've heard of the flower fairy's name a long time ago. If I could meet her, I wouldn't have lived in vain. Right?" Lin Shuanghe's voice continued. "Everyone says that Ru Yun Lu's beauties and fine wine are the best in a way. How can a poetry gathering be more interesting than Ru Yun Lu? I think we should stay in Jinling for a few more days. The teachers won't follow us anyway. Everyone should take care of their own bodyguards and manservants. We can have fun for a few days. Other people won't know." Hien listened in a daze. She knew about Ru Yun Lu. She heard that out of all the brothels in Dowei, Ru Yun Lu had the most beauties. Moreover, each of them was fat and thin and had different moods. It was like 100 flowers blooming. Among them, the flower fairy was extraordinarily beautiful and unforgettable. This group of people actually used the poetry gathering as an excuse to secretly visit a brothel. If the teachers found out, each of their legs would be broken. Hien sighed at their courage. She didn't want to get involved in this matter and was about to leave. Suddenly, a voice came from inside. "Who is it?" The next moment, the door to the firewood room was opened. A group of youths sat around and looked over. Hien grabbed his collar and angrily said, "You were eavesdropping?" "I didn't want to eavesdrop," Hien explained. "I was just passing by." They were the ones who spoke so loudly and didn't close the door. They were so arrogant. How could they blame her? And he threw her into the firewood room and closed the door. The youths looked at her with burning eyes and talked at once. "That brat he Rufei actually heard it. How unlucky. Why don't we not go? What if this guy tells on us?" "No, it's not easy to go to Jinling. How can we ruin it because of this guy? It's too much of a loss." "Then what should we do? Kill him?" A youth said sinisterly. "Bury him alive on the spot?" Hien was shocked and said weakly, "You don't have to be so violent. I actually didn't hear anything." Brother Lin?" She asked Lin Shuanghe for help. In any case, they had progressed together before. At this time, he couldn't just leave her in the lurch. Lin Shuanghe stared at her and thought for a moment. He closed his fan. It's not a big deal. I believe that even if brother he heard it, he won't tell on us." "Is your belief useful?" Yanhee's face was very dark. "Are you going to take responsibility if something happens?" "I won't take responsibility. However, we could just bring him along." Lin Shuanghe spread his hands. "This way, he won't harm himself." Lin Shuanghe could always come up with a strange solution for these things. Hien struggled. "Sir won't agree. I don't have an invitation. You don't have to worry about that." Lin Shuanghe smiled. "Leave it to me." Just like that, Hien was forced to go to Jinling with the other youths. Lin Shuanghe didn't know where he got the invitation, but Sir agreed. Although Madam, he was a bit uneasy, He Yuanshan was very supportive. As long as it was something that could bring glory to He Rufei, he was very supportive of it. Therefore, without much effort, Hien went to Jinling with the other youths for the first time. They went by water. It was Ian's first time on a big boat. He vomited so much that he almost threw up his heart and liver. The other youths didn't like to bring a burden like him, so they laughed at his weak body. The only one who had a good relationship with Hien was Lin Shuanghe, but he had already become good friend with the boatman's daughter. When he was free, he would tell stories to the boatman's daughter, which made her laugh nonstop. He didn't have time to care about brother He, who was forced to go on this long journey because of him. Hien couldn't say anything about the bitterness in his heart. He raised his head and leaned against the side of the boat, listening to the cheerful laughter of the youths playing cricket. He looked at the cold moon in the sky and felt the cold wind blowing. His heart was particularly cold. Just as he was thinking about whether or not he could fish on this boat, he suddenly saw someone patting his shoulder from behind. Hien subconsciously turned his head. The next moment, something cold was stuffed into his mouth. He was shocked and wanted to scream, so that thing slid down his throat and into his stomach. Cough, cough, cough. Hien coughed violently and looked at the person in front of him. The white-robed youth supported himself with both hands on the side of the boat and casually looked at her. Under the moonlight, his pupils clearly reflected his own image. Hien hurriedly touched his throat and asked, What did you give me to eat?" Xiao Ju lazily said, "Poison." "What?" Hien turned pale with fright. "Chu." He supported his chin with one hand and looked at the distant flowing water. "Don't scream. If you scream too loudly, you will die very quickly." Hien's tears were about to fall. "I have no grievances with you. Why do you want to harm me?" The youth's mouth twitched. His usually lazy face had a hint of evil. "Isn't this because I am afraid that you will tell on me?" "I won't tell on you." Hien panicked. "Quickly give me the antidote." "There is no antidote," Xiao Ju indifferently replied. "There is no antidote." He didn't look like he was lying. Hien was stunned for a moment. He only felt that his legs were weak. He couldn't support himself and sat down on the ground. Why is it like this? So these youths tricked me into coming out just to make it easier to kill me? It seems that this place is indeed very suitable for killing people. If a dead person is thrown into the river, there will be no trace of them. But if they're eaten by fish after they die, will it be cold? At that time, she was not very brave and had many thoughts. After thinking for a long time, she finally raised her head and asked the youth standing at the bow of the boat, "How many days do I have left to live?" Xiao Ju didn't expect her to ask this question. He was startled for a moment and snorted, 5 days. 5 days, He Yin murmured. Only 3 days until we reach Jinling. Well, there's still 2 days left. I can go and see the flower fairy. Since I'm going to die, it is not a loss to see the beauty before I die. She thought so. Xiao Ju sneered and didn't answer. Ian hugged the mast of the boat and sat for a while. After an unknown amount of time, she stood up and walked in shakily. After 2 steps, she suddenly realized something. She didn't vomit. Ian understood in hindsight. He jogged in front of Xiao Ju. She looked up and asked him excitedly, "Huijin, brother, I don't get seasick anymore. Did you just give me medicine for seasickness?" Although the mask covered her face, it couldn't hide the smile on her face and the joy in her voice. Xiao Ju looked at her indifferently and curved his lips. Although his tone was gentle, his words were harsh. "Idiot." He turned and walked in. Ian looked at his back and felt that this person was really boring. Medicine for seasickness was fine. Why did he have to tease and scare her? Although she was really scared, Ian couldn't help but laugh when she remembered the funny things that happened when she was young. In the boat, not far away, the sound of the pipa came from a woman's singing voice. Song mountain far away, woo mountain far away, the small boat travels all the way, the dream is hard to pull back, fleeting life song several times. It's hard to think, it's hard to hate, but now you and I are separated, the spring breeze is old and young. The woman's voice was gentle and clear. It was even more moving than the sound of the pipa. Lin Shuanghe pointed at the boat with his fan and said, "That's it." Back then, the flower fairy's music was like this too. It lingered in the air for 3 days. He suddenly froze. As if he thought of something, he quickly walked forward and said something to the servant on the boat. The servant quickly left. Not long after, the boat in front stopped. The curtain was lifted and a woman walked out with a peep in her arms. The woman was wearing a light red dress. Her eyes were half curved and her lips were like cherry blossoms. She was soft and gentle, charming and delicate. Standing at the bow of the boat, just her appearance alone was enough to make people's hearts ripple. The lights on the boat made it difficult for people to see her face clearly. However, even if they couldn't see her clearly, they knew that she was a peerless beauty. She held the peep in her arms and didn't speak. She just bowed to the crowd. It was like an old dream by the Qinhuai River, illuminating the ignorant eyes of the youths. "Traveling fairy?" Lin Shuanghe said in surprise. Chapter 185. Hua Yuxian? He Yin was stunned. Everyone on the boat was stunned when they heard this name. The singer holding the pipa was also shocked. She looked at Lin Shuanghe and stared at him for a long time. Then, she called out uncertainly, "Young Master Lin?" It really was Hua Yuxian. Ian quickly walked forward. He rubbed his eyes subconsciously, afraid that this was all just a dream. Who would have thought that Lin Shuanghe would really meet Hua Yuxian, just as he mentioned her? But why was Hua Yuxian in Jinling? Ian was not the only one surprised. Lin Shuanghe said, Aren't you married? You followed that scholar surnamed Wang to Yangzhou. Why are you in Jinling? Am I dreaming?" He turned to look at everyone. Their reactions told him that it was indeed true. Hua Yuxian looked at everyone on the boat. She was also excited. She calmed herself down and said, "I have divorced my husband. Yangzhou is not my hometown after all, so I decided to come back to Jinling. I have only been in Jinling for half a month. I did not expect to meet all the young masters here." Her eyes curved. She was as charming as before. "It has been many years since we last met. How are the young masters?" Lin Shuanghe moved his lips. After a while, he said, "I am fine. But Miss Yuxian, you are now. I have returned to Ruyunlu." Hua Yuxian was very calm. "I have always grown up in Ruyunlu. In Jinling, Ruyunlu is also my home." She looked at everyone. "If the young masters have nothing to do, why don't you go to Ruyunlu later? Ruyunlu is not as good as it used to be, but It is not bad. Lin Shuanghe turned and asked everyone, "Let's go to Ryunlu? It has been so many years. I want to see it again." This time, even Yin He, who was always picky, did not say anything. Everyone agreed at the same time. Hua Yuxian saw this and smiled. She ordered the boatman to lead the two boats to the shore. He Yin stared at the blurred lights on the shore. He could not calm down. Half of the beauties in Jinling City were from entering Cloud's restaurant. Every girl in the brothel had a flower name when they reached a certain age. Only Hua Yuxian didn't have a common name like Peony or Peony. She had chosen her name herself. Taking this from a travelogue, it was said that in the country of Chiotzi, there was a pillow the color of agate. The pillow was the 10 continents, the 3 islands, the 4 seas, and the 5 lakes were all in a dream. It was named the Traveling Immortal Pillow. When Hua Yuxian was young, she especially loved reading travel books. She hoped that she could marry a lover in the future. She longed for her future husband to take her everywhere. He named himself Traveling Immortal. The mother of entering Cloud's Tower also felt that this name was very good, so she called it Flower Fairy. Flower Fairy. When Hua Yuxian was 14 years old, she was already famous in Wei because of her beauty. She was also very talented and knew everything about music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Many princes and young masters were willing to throw away a lot of money in exchange for a smile from a beauty. Naturally, she was fully deserving of the title of top courtesan in entering Cloud's Tower. For the youths of Xian Chong Dojo, Hua Yuxian was like a fairy from the 9th heaven. Not to mention that the courtesans of the brothel were inferior, for children like them who had strict upbringing and would be beaten until they couldn't get out of bed when they entered the brothel. Hua Yuxian was simply an unattainable dream. They didn't want to get close to her or anything. As long as they could take a look and see the legendary peerless beauty, they would be satisfied. Therefore, the Jinling Poetry Festival was simply an opportunity that all the youths wished for. Each of them was eager to try, rubbing their hands together. In addition, there was Lin Shuanghe, this person who frequently came up with bad ideas. Very quickly, all the youths decided on their manservants and bodyguards. He Yin was a girl, so he didn't have the yearning that the youth had for Hua Yuxian's dream lover. However, he also wanted to see what kind of beauty the world said was rarely seen in 100 years was. However, while he was looking forward to it, he was also a bit nervous. If He Yuan Sheng found out about this, he didn't know how long he would be punished to kneel in the ancestral hall. The youths who came out together were all wealthy and respectable. Naturally, they didn't lack money. However, it was their first time entering a brothel, and they didn't have much experience. They dressed themselves up like peacocks, thinking that this would show that they were full of confidence. Except for Yang Mingji, Xiao Ju, and He Yin. Xiao Ju was used to wearing a white gown and a silver crown. Her charming face was frosty. Yang Mingji was a modest gentleman, clean and handsome. He Yin was afraid of attracting attention. Originally, she wore a mask and was already different from others. If she also wore gold and silver like Yan He, she was afraid that the news would spread to the He family in Shuajing tomorrow. Therefore, she wore the most ordinary clothes and stood beside the group of wealthy youths like a manservant. Even though the manservant was still wearing a mask that covered his face tightly, he still couldn't help it. Old Madame Ding of Entering Cloud's brothel had seen countless people. With one look, she could tell that this group of youths were all inexperienced. She could also tell that their family background was not ordinary. She thought that it was some family's young masters who came out to see the world. Immediately, her smile became even more enthusiastic. She only cared about serving the best food and wine, and called for sensible and obedient girls to stand by the side to serve them. The youths were served until they were floating. They felt that they could finally hold their heads high and were no longer children in the eyes of their fathers and brothers. When they were drunk, there were still people who remembered their purpose for coming. They only asked the girl beside them, "Where's Hua Yuxian? Why don't I see Hua Yuxian? We came here to see Hua Yuxian." The girl still wanted to muddle through. She whispered into the youth's ear, "Young master, if you say so, you will hurt Kai Lian's heart. Am I not good enough? Why are you thinking of someone else?" Although she was not considered stunning, she had delicate features. Her pitiful appearance immediately made people feel pity for her. The youth was about to comfort her when Lin Shuanghe opened his folding fan and said flirtatiously, "We have 11 guests here. Everyone is thinking of Miss Kai Lian's words. I am afraid that Miss Kai Lian will not be able to handle it." And he also said, "That's right." After saying that, he threw a silver ingot on the table. "We want to see Hua Yuxian." This group of young masters seemed to be of high status. Kai Lian did not dare to offend them. Seeing that she could not fool them, she thought about it and went to get her helper, old Madame Ding, to come over. Old Madame Ding flung her handkerchief and smiled apologetically. "Young masters, I am really sorry. Recently, Hua Yuxian has not been feeling well. She is recuperating and is not seeing guests. Young masters like Hua Yuxian. Today, entering Cloud's brothel has not been a good host. Ding Xiang, go and get our drunken red dust here. Today's wine is my gift to the young masters. I hope that the young masters will forgive me." Old Madame Ding had stayed in entering Cloud's brothel for so many years. She had seen all kinds of monsters. It was more than enough to deal with a group of young boys. After a few words, she expressed her apology and made it difficult for the others to say anything else. After she left, the youths looked at the wine jars on the table and looked at each other. One of them said, "That's it. How can it be like this?" Another person was not in a good mood. "Our luck is too bad. What do you mean by coming back after a few days? Once the poetry gathering is over, we have to go back. Won't we have wasted this trip?" That's right. We just want to see what she looks like. We can just sit there and not move. There is no need to play the zither or dance. Otherwise, when we go back, how can we brag to others? I have already prepared the silver. This is too miserable." He silently picked at the fried peanuts in front of him and ate. This had nothing to do with her. She did not have the right to speak and did not want to speak. Even if she could not see Hua Yuxian, she could look at Rose Jasmine. After all, it was not her money that was spent. But the youths were different. They did not come all the way to Jinling just to participate in a poetry gathering. They were more interested in the legendary Hua Yuxian. Therefore, the few of them discussed and came up with a bad idea. All the girls in entering Cloud's brothel live in the attic. Let's find out where Hua Yuxian lives and look for her through the window. How about that? The rose cake in Hian's mouth fell with a pada sound. The crumbs splashed on the Xiao Ju beside him. He frowned and brushed it away. The youth seemed to have found a good idea and was very excited. "Yes, let's do it. I won't do anything. When I came here, I bought a hairpin from Shua Jing's Baozhu shop. I just want to give this hairpin to her and see what she looks like. I will knock on the window. If she hates me, I won't go in. If the fairy is kind, I will climb over the window and ask if she can meet us. We came all the way from Shua Jing to see her. Wouldn't it be a pity if we just leave without fighting for her?" Ian thought that it was indeed a case of blind lust. He could even think of this kind of idea. What was the difference between him and those flower thieves who peeped at girls? Were all the men in the world like this? They were so enamored of beauty that they did not even care about their faces. But she did not expect that this bad idea would be approved by most of the youths. The rest of the youths agreed. "This idea is good. Why don't we do it?" Little Yin restrained herself, but it was probably because she was a woman, so she couldn't help but remind them, if someone finds out, they'll think that we're flower thieves. Moreover, if we enter without an invitation, won't we ruin the reputation of the flower fairy? At that time, the youths were pure and innocent. They did not think that the girls in entering Cloud's brothel did not have a reputation to speak of. After thinking for a while, someone said, "We will knock on the window from outside and pass her a note. If she agrees, we will go in. Before that, we will not enter her room." Ian was speechless. What was the difference? The youths immediately went to find out where Hua Yuxian's room was. Although they were a little stupid when it came to sex, they were not really dumb. After all, they were the youths specially selected by Xian Chong Hall to participate in the poetry competition. Each of them was smart and generous. Not long after, they found out where Hua Yuxian lived from the other girls. Hua Yuxian lived on the top floor of the attic. There was a lake behind the house, and there was no one else around. Among the 10 youths, most of them were quite skilled. Generally speaking, The students in Xianchang Hall were not too biased in their studies and martial arts. It was rare to find someone like Yang Mingji who was good at his studies but terrible at martial arts. The leader of the youths rubbed his palms and was eager to try. He even turned to ask Xiao Ju and Yanhe, "Why don't you two go first?" After all, these two were the best in martial arts. Climbing over a wall was as easy as walking on flat ground. Xiao Ju said, "I'm not going." Yanhe said in disgust, "I'm not going either. I'm not a pervert." Lin Shuanghe wanted to go, but he was not good at martial arts. His back hurt from walking too much, let alone climbing over a wall. He could not be the first to go. Yang Mingji had always been polite. He had been forced to come to Cloud Tower by the others, so he would not do something so impolite. Tian's words were automatically ignored by the youths. When the youth saw this, he did not say much. He only spat twice on his hands and silently climbed up with the rope. Tian stood on the ground and looked at the disappearing dot in the night sky. He thought to himself, "That's a little too much." One person climbed through the window while the others kept watch. After all, if something happened to one person, the students in the hall would not be able to escape. No one wanted to go back and be punished by the family. That was why they kept a close watch. However, the security at the back of Cloud Tower was very lax. They probably thought that no one would dare to openly kidnap someone at this time. Ian was about to break his neck when there was finally some movement on the other side. The rope shook. Not long after, the youth who went up came down. He was excited and his face was flushed red. His classmates beside him asked, "How was it? Did you see her?" The child nodded furiously. The crowd became even more enthusiastic. "How was it? Is the flower fairy really as amazing as the rumors say?" He nodded furiously again. Then how is she?" This person was protective of the fair sex. He still remembered that the flower fairy had not been feeling well recently. "Is she very haggard? Is it serious? Do we need a famous doctor to take a look?" The youth puffed up his cheeks and said after a while, The flower fairy is locked in the house and under house arrest. When I passed her the note, she opened the window and let me in. She even asked me if I could save her." Everyone looked at each other, not understanding what he meant. Lin Shuanghe put away his fan and asked doubtfully, "Do you mean that Cloud Tower mistreats her?" The youth nodded, then shook his head and stomped his foot. "I don't know. Forget it. Come with me." Everyone was dumbfounded. Ian's heart skipped a beat. This matter was getting out of hand. "It's okay. The flower fairy said that those people only go to her house twice a day. After today, they won't go again. Her door is locked and there are guards downstairs. We can go up and ask what's going on. If there's really a problem, as men, we can't just leave her in the lurch, can we?" Young men around the age of 10 were always looking forward to the day when they could become the hero who saved the beauty. The more beautiful the beauty was, the more powerful the hero would be. If the beauty was a peerless beauty, it would be even better. The hero would definitely become a legend. He subconsciously refused. This isn't good, right? How about I stay here and keep a lookout for you? I won't go up." The youths looked at him with burning eyes. "What's not good about it? You're weak and easy to bully. If there's any movement, you might run away first. We don't trust you. Brother Mingji, your body is weak. Why don't you keep a lookout?" Yang Mingji couldn't ask for anything more and agreed. Xiao Ju and Yin, he didn't want to go, but after being coaxed by the youths, they finally agreed. Yin wanted to vomit blood, but he couldn't do anything about it. He followed the crowd and climbed up the rope to the attic. The windows of the attic were already open. The youths went in one by one. When they entered the room, they suddenly felt a woman's fragrance. There was only a dim oil lamp in the room. Under the oil lamp, there was a peerless beauty sitting on a rattan chair. There were actually many beauties in Shuo City, but the woman in front of them was captivating. Her eyes were round, but the corners of her eyes were sharp. She was charming and innocent. Her skin was extremely white and her lips were shockingly bright. Her long hair wasn't tied up and just casually draped behind her head. It contrasted with her vermilion muslin dress. There was no need to talk about her appearance. Her gentle and charming manner was more charming than words. At first glance, she was like a goddess descending to the mortal world. The usually arrogant and noisy youths all fell silent in front of this woman. Their faces were all red and their eyes were stunned. Tian's face was covered by the mask. He only thought that there was actually such a beautiful woman in the world. I am Hua Yuxian. The woman's smile was like a flower. Her voice was soft and sweet. Greetings to the young masters. Hua Yuxian was a few years older than the oldest child here. Because she had always stayed in Ruyanlu, she didn't look immature at all. When the children were suddenly spoken to, they stuttered and didn't say anything. One by one, they turned into quails. Even Lin Shuanghe, who was the most skilled in this, didn't know what to say for a moment. It was Xiao Ju who opened her mouth and said calmly, I heard that Miss is under house arrest. Hua Yuxian looked at Xiao Ju. Her gaze couldn't help but pause. There was no other reason. This youth's appearance was too outstanding among his peers, and his gaze was calm from the beginning to the end. He wasn't fooled by her appearance. His gaze was as calm as water. This was rare. Hua Yuxian also felt that it was interesting. But soon, she answered, That's right. Who put you under house arrest? And he was a straightforward person. He immediately asked, Mother from Ruyanlu? Not really. Hua Yuxian smiled. Although she was a woman from Ruyanlu, she was neither servile nor overbearing when speaking to these youths. She had a good sense of propriety. She was neither too distant nor too domineering. Mother had no choice. The one who put me under house arrest was the cousin of the governor's wife. This was a slight detour. Lin Shuanghe was indeed someone who had read all kinds of stories. He immediately asked, Did that person want to force you to return home? Hua Yuxian looked at the young master, holding a fan in front of her. She was slightly surprised. Then, she smiled and said, That's right. For a moment, there were low gasps in the room, followed by angry reprimands. How can this be? This local official is too overbearing. Is no one going to do anything about it? Snatching a civilian girl in broad daylight. This is a violation of the law. Is there any way to get you out of here? The flower-traveling deity looked at these young youths and smiled. Her voice was also very gentle as she comforted them. Actually, it's fine if it's just the traveling deity. Once you enter the cloud pavilion, you have no choice but to do so. I already knew that this day would come, but because I implicated others, Her expression dimmed, and a layer of worry appeared between her brows. The worry of a beauty was pitiful, and he swung his ponytail and said, Miss, if you have something to say, just say it. If you have any difficulties, we may be able to solve them for you. He coughed lightly and praised himself. My family background is much more powerful than that governor. Although he was dressed very extravagantly and his clothes were embroidered with layers of gold and silver thread, one could tell that he was wealthy. Not only him, the group of youths, especially the one in the white robe, did not look like ordinary people. Hua Yuxian had stayed in Ruyanlu since she was young. Although she was not as sharp as Madame Ding, she was better than ordinary people. When Yanhe said this, a ray of hope rose in her heart. Here, she was a weak girl. Naturally, she could not go against the government. Even Ruyanlu and Madame Ding had to obey Ing Tianfu. But if this young master was really more powerful than the governor, as he said, she might have a chance of survival. It did not matter how she was. What was important was that that person was fine. Thinking about this, Hua Yuxian smiled and looked at Yanhe. She asked gently, May I know young master's name? Yanhe blushed from Hua Yuxian's smile. He was about to say his name when he suddenly remembered that he came to Ruyanlu behind his family's back. He said, My surname is Yan. So it's you, young Master Yan. The flower fairy looked at him. No matter what, I have to thank you, young master. She sighed softly. Actually, I was the cause of all this. Just as Lin Shuanghe had guessed, Hua Yuxian was famous in Ruyanlu when she was 14. After she turned 16, there was an endless stream of people who wanted to marry her. Madame Ding could not bear to part with such a money tree. Of course, she wanted to keep Hua Yuxian for a while longer. Besides, they had called each other mother and daughter for many years. There was some warmth between them. Madame Ding was also planning to find a good family to marry Hua Yuxian off when the time came. With Hua Yuxian's status, it was inevitable that she would be criticized as a wife. But if she went to a rich family and served them well for a few years, she would have a son by her side. She would have a good life in the future. But when Hua Yuxian was 18, she fell in love with someone. This person was called Wang Sheng. He was not from Jinling. He came from Yangzhou. To be precise, he was the son of a rich silk merchant in Yangzhou. He came to Jinling with his friends for business. He entered Ruyun Lu by chance and was stunned by Hua Yuxian. It was love at first sight. Hua Yuxian was so famous. There were countless young men who liked her. Wang Sheng was not particularly outstanding among them. But love came out of nowhere. Hua Yuxian fell in love with Wang Sheng, who looked like a scholar among all the young men in Wuling. To be honest, although Wang Sheng came from a merchant family, his literary talent was not ordinary. His family hoped that he would pass the exam and become an official. But Wang Sheng thought it was too utilitarian. In his entire life, he only wished to travel freely. This was exactly the same as the flower fairy's wish since she was a child. On the first day they met, they drank and chatted all night. Wang Sheng's family was in business. He had traveled extensively since he was young. He heard many strange stories. Hua Yuxian, who had never left Ruyun Lu, was naturally attracted by these stories. A talented man and a beautiful woman. Under the moonlight, everything came together naturally. Madame Ding looked down on Wang Sheng. She felt that Wang Sheng's family was just a business. She would rather be a concubine than a merchant's wife. And if Hua Yuxian really followed Wang Sheng, she would have to go back to Yangzhou. They would not be able to see each other again. She did not want Hua Yuxian to leave Jinling. My good daughter, don't be blinded by men. I have seen many in these years. Madame Ding guided her patiently. If you go to Yangzhou with him and suffer in the future, who will you complain to? You will be the one who suffers. Hua Yuxian smiled perfunctorily. She wanted to redeem herself. These years, she had saved a lot of money. Just as she was about to get enough money to redeem herself, she met an uninvited guest. It was Yingtian Prefecture's governor's wife's younger brother, Tong Qiushi. Chapter 186. Tong Qiushi took a liking to Hua Yuxian and waved his hand, offering 1,000 taels of gold to make her his concubine. His sister was the governor at that time, and Mother Ding did not dare to offend her. Many of the ladies in Entering Cloud's brothel were taken as concubines by officials and nobles. Mother Ding was happy to do them a favor. Firstly, those ladies were willing to do so. It was a good thing that they did not have to show their faces in public. Secondly, for Entering Cloud's brothel to be able to stand in Jinling for so many years, they needed favors. But Tong Qiushi took a liking to Hua Yuxian. Hua Yuxian's heart was all on Wang Sheng, and Mother Ding could see it clearly. She also knew that although her daughter looked like she was good with money, she had her own ideas. Now that she was in love with Wang Sheng, she would not take a liking to Tong Qiushi. She was afraid that she would rather die than live in dishonor and fight to the death. Mother Ding wanted to persuade Tong Qiushi, but did not expect this young Master Tong to be a tough nut to crack. That night, he sent people to cause a ruckus and almost burned down Entering Cloud's brothel. The governor was henpecked and naturally sided with his brother-in-law. Mother Ding could not say anything. While she was angry at Tong Qiushi for being unreasonable, there was nothing she could do. Although Entering Cloud's brothel knew many officials and rich families, a strong dragon could not defeat a local snake. No matter how beautiful Hua Yuxian was, she was just a brothel girl. Offending the governor for a brothel girl was not a good deal. Ever since Hua Yuxian met Wang Sheng, she only went on stage to play the guqin and became a performer. After a while, there were fewer people who could stand up for her. Tong Qiushi took Hua Yuxian's body contract and ordered people to put her under house arrest. He even picked a good day and planned to bring her into the residence. That was not all. He also ordered people to find out where Wang Sheng was and imprisoned him in the village, torturing and beating him every day. These things were found out by the ladies in Entering Cloud's brothel, and they secretly told Hua Yuxian. Hua Yuxian was worried about Wang Sheng's injury, but she was unable to protect herself. After a while, just like what Mother Ding said, she became seriously ill due to excessive worry. If the young masters are willing to help, I will not ask for anything else, the flower-traveling deity said earnestly. I heard that young Master Wang is being held captive in a manor in the north of the city. I would like to trouble the young masters to rescue young Master Wang. Tong Qiushi is after me. Because of my mistake, I have implicated young Master Wang. I have not been able to sleep at night. Wasn't this a vulgar book about a tyrant forcing a woman to marry him, breaking up a pair of lovebirds, and breaking them apart? The youths present all felt a sense of righteousness as a hero welling up in their hearts. That's not difficult. It's just saving someone. Don't worry, miss. That young Master Wang will definitely be brought out for you. Hua Yoxian's eyes lit up, and she bowed down gratefully. Thank you, young masters. Everyone quickly reached out to help her up. Lin Shuanghe looked at her thoughtfully and asked, May I ask, Miss Yuxian, what will happen after young Master Wang is rescued? Hua Yuxian was stunned and then smiled bitterly. If the young masters can rescue young Master Wang, please help me tell him that Yuxian and young Master Wang are not fated to be together. I have implicated young Master Wang previously. Please leave Jinling quickly and forget about Yuxian in the future. You don't plan to see him? Yin, who had been sitting obediently at the side, finally asked, What do you plan to do? She had been hiding in the dark. Hua Yuxian did not know what to do. When she saw a masked person talking, she was shocked, but she quickly recovered and shook her head. Since he is the governor's wife's brother, I have no other choice. It is not up to me to decide. It is better to accept reality early. When she talked about her future, she was more carefree than when she talked about Wang Sheng. It was clear that she loved Wang Sheng more than she loved herself. Miss Yuxian, don't worry. The youth who had climbed in through the window first said, Since we have seen this, we must help until the end. Who would have thought that there would be such a disgusting bastard in broad daylight? How can we sit by and do nothing when a dog official is bullying people? Whether it is young Master Wang or you, we will ensure your safety. His words were sonorous and forceful, but how to ensure the safety would require further planning. While they were talking, footsteps came from outside. Hua Yuxian stood up and said, Someone is coming. I'll go out and hold them off. You guys leave quickly. Then he bowed deeply to the crowd and said, I'll leave the matter of Master Wang to you young masters. She pushed the door open and found an excuse to talk to the people outside. The rest of the youths climbed down from the window like they had just come. Yang Mingji, who had been waiting anxiously downstairs, heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that everyone had returned safe and sound. He was about to ask them what had happened inside, but he raised his head and saw that the youngsters all had gloomy expressions. So he asked curiously, What happened? Why do you all look so pale? Lin Shuanghe sighed and shook his head. Seeing people suffer makes me feel bad. His friends told him what had happened. Yang Mingji was also angry. How can this be? Does the government not care? The people who did this are the government. And he disagreed. Do you still want them to put righteousness before family? Everyone was silent. After a while, someone said, Since we have already promised Miss Yuxian, we will go and save young Master Wang first. Then we will find that despicable Tong Qiushi. Miss Yuxian's contract is in his hands. We will have him sign the contract and return it to Miss Yuxian. In this way, won't Miss Yuxian and young Master Wang be able to fly back to Yangzhou and live together? It is easy to save young Master Wang, and it is not difficult to get the contract back, Yin said carefully. But we will have to leave Jinling after the poetry competition. What if young Master Wang finds trouble with them after leaving Jinling? It is said that civilians do not fight with the government. Young Master Wang's family is just doing business. It is easy for the governor here to control them. It looks like we are helping them, but who knows if Tong Qiushi will vent all his anger on young Master Wang. The youths were acting on impulse, but she was a girl. She couldn't help but think more about Hua Yuxian. It seemed that Hua Yuxian had only asked them to save young Master Wang and not herself because of this. Tong Qiushi had come for Hua Yuxian. They could save her now, but not forever. Hiru Fei, why are you destroying our prestige? Someone said unhappily. I think, brother, he is right. Lin Shuanghe held his fan. We have to think about the future before we can do anything. Why, Jin? He asked Xiao Ju, who was watching coldly. Do you have any good ideas? The youths looked at him. After all, he was the number one in the Xianchang Hall. He was talented and smart. Maybe he could think of a way to get the best of both worlds. Xiaoju looked at them and said, I do. Lin Shuanghe's eyes lit up. He praised, You really do have an idea. Tell us, what should we do? It's just a governor of Tian. Xiao Ju said carelessly, Show your identities and he will retreat. He thought he could see clearly. It was too troublesome to go around in circles. A higher rank could crush people. The youths here all came from families of officials. There were many who were higher ranked than Tian. Didn't Tong Qiushi use his power to bully people? As long as someone had more power than him, they could bully him. Evil people bullied the weak and feared the strong. Just as he finished speaking, someone shook his head. No, if my family knew that I went to a brothel, they would break my legs. How can I show my identity? I can't either. Brother Huaijin, you are killing 10,000 enemies, but losing 8,000 of your own men. That's too violent. You should be more tactful. Xiao Ju hugged his sword and leaned against the wall. He looked at them lazily and said, Think about it slowly. I'm going back. He turned to leave, but Lin Shuanghe grabbed the corner of his shirt. He turned back and saw Lin Shuanghe seemed to have made up his mind. He waved his fan and said, So be it. You are afraid, but I am not. Even if my legs are broken, I will save Miss Yu Xian and Master Wang. He even provoked his hesitant classmates. Are you still a man? Are you going to watch the girls jump into the fire pit? Lin Shuanghe, don't want to be associated with cowards like you. Stay away from me. I will save them alone and be a hero alone. The youths were indignant. Who are you calling cowards? Who isn't a man? I'm not afraid either. And he played with the end of his ponytail. His eyes were shining brightly, and he looked excited. So what if I'm beaten? It's not like I haven't been beaten before. It's worth it to be beaten for saving people. In this kind of situation, the more people there were, the more lively it would be. Two people took the lead and said, The law cannot be enforced when there are too many people. The youths all agreed. Soon, they expressed that no matter what, they would save Master Wang and Miss Yu Xian safely. Xiao Ju did not participate in their conversation, but the youths still pulled him along. They crowded around him and begged, Brother Huaijin, come with us too. With you watching over us, we won't make any mistakes. Ian stood at the side and looked at them with interest. Did they really think that Xiao Ju was their father? Xiao Ju looked impatient. Finally, he could not stand the persuasion of the crowd and reluctantly agreed. Thus, everyone returned to the inn and thought of a plan. Since we have to reveal our identities, why don't we go directly to the governor's residence? Someone said, Let them quickly return Miss Yoxian's body contract and let Master Wang go. How about that? No. Yang Mingji shook his head lightly. According to the law, the body contract is in Tong Qiushi's hands. If we force it, it will be unreasonable. We may even be sued by the guilty party first, and that evil governor's family will be sued. Also, Master Wang is in his hands. It is not good to alert the enemy. What if Tong Qiushi kills Master Wang? What he said made sense. Lin Shuanghe asked sincerely, Mingji, do you have any ideas? Yang Mingji thought for a while. Let's save Master Wang first. Then we will think of a way to get the body contract. After that, if Tong Qiushi comes looking for us, we will reveal our identities. At that time, everything will be settled. They can only ask for trouble. Wonderful. His friend's eyes lit up. If that's the case, then Tong Qiushi will have no choice but to suffer in silence. Even though they usually did not like to use their power to bully others at a time like this, it was quite refreshing to use their identity to suppress others. When dealing with scoundrels, there is no need to pay attention to the way of a gentleman. Let's see who is more scoundrel. He raised his eyebrows. Then it's decided. We will split into two groups. One group will find the body contract. The other group will go save Master Wang. He made the final decision. Everyone immediately split into groups. Xiao Ju and He each led a group. The governor's residence was heavily guarded. Xiao Ju was skilled and led 4 people to the governor's residence to find the body contract. He led the remaining people to the manor in the north of the city to save Master Wang. After everything was split, Yin raised his hand from the corner and asked weakly, Excuse me, what should I do? Xianchang Hall had selected 10 youths to go to Jinling. Yin had been forced to come by Lin Xuanhe. 10 people divided into 2 groups was suitable. 11 people were not easy to divide. Why don't we let him stay at the inn? He will only drag us down if he goes. No, Yin frowned. If he stays at the inn, he may drag us down. If the soldiers find us and give us up, the plan will be ruined. Hiru Fei, you follow me. You're not skilled. When the time comes, you will be on the lookout. Understand? Yin said, okay. She had already perfected the art of decorating the room. Yin didn't mind at all. Yin was still a bit nervous. Although the youths of the Xianchang dojo were the best in Shuajing, they were in Jinling, a place they weren't familiar with. Even if they had identities to protect them, before their identities were exposed, the other party might not be merciful. This was the first time they had to take charge and face the so-called big shot. Hopefully, everything would go smoothly. When night fell, the 2 groups set off. There was a manor in the north of the city that belonged to the Tong family. It was easy to find. There were often servants of the Tong family who were thrown into the manor because they made mistakes. They would be tortured to death within a few days. And he ordered people to buy a few horses and went to the manor under the cover of the night. When they arrived at the manor, the sky was already completely dark. The location was very desolate. It was surrounded by wilderness. It was not good to hide people. However, it seemed that Tong Qiushi did not have the intention to hide. With a patrol governor as her brother-in-law, she would be able to do whatever she wanted without any worries. Yin He and the other youths dismounted from their horses. Yin stood in the wilderness at the entrance of the manor to keep watch. He said, you stay here. If someone comes, blow the whistle. We will leave when we find the person. Understand? Yin nodded. She did not speak much. Before she left, Madame told her that the more she spoke, the more mistakes she would make. She had to be careful with her words. Yin He and the group quickly disappeared into the wilderness. Yin squatted in the weeds in the field. There were many mosquitoes in the summer. The parts of her clothes that were covered were still fine. However, her exposed neck and wrists were covered in red and swollen bumps after a short while. She did not dare to scratch. She was afraid that the noise would attract people and disrupt Yin He's plan. She could only bear with it silently. After a long time, there seemed to be movement from inside. Yin stretched her neck. As expected, a group of people came out. The leader was Yin He. He was tall and carried a person on his back. It should be that Master Wang. Yin was delighted. She was saved. She was about to wave at Yin He when she heard a loud noise from outside. There are thieves. Catch the thieves. The one with the surname Wang has called for reinforcements. Catch them. It was unknown how many people lived in this manor. Previously, it was pitch black. Yin only thought that it was a desolate place. Now that she heard the shout, she saw torches lit up in all directions. With a rough look, she estimated that there were more than 100 torches. The plan was always foolproof. However, it was extremely difficult to save a person silently. She was on the lookout without making a sound. However, Yin He and the rest created a huge commotion when they tried to save someone. Yin was anxious. There were so many people. They could not fight them head-on. They could only run away. She did not hesitate anymore. She stood out and blew a whistle to signal them to run. In fact, Yin did run away. The few youths were also panicked by the sudden appearance of the crowd. However, they were still protected by their usual skills. Without saying anything, they ran to the place where the horses were held. They leaped onto the horses and dashed out of the manor. The sound of the horses' hooves came closer and closer. A portion of the people chased after them, while a portion of them stayed in the manor. Yin was stunned. They left her behind. She tried her best to catch up with Yin He and the rest. However, how could 2 legs outrun 4 legs? She shouted with all her strength, "Wait for me, brother Yin." However, her voice was quickly drowned by the sound of the crowd. She ran until she was exhausted. She could not catch up with them anymore. Unexpectedly, someone whipped her from behind. Yin only felt pain on her back. A bloody mark appeared on her thin clothes. She staggered and fell to the ground. She turned around and looked at the crowd that was getting closer and closer. The person outside came back and scolded, "Boss, she ran away." "Don't worry." That person stared at Yin. His expression was ferocious. They even caught a young one. If Master Tong wants her, send her to him. Hey, that person lifted her chin and asked, was the person just now your accomplice? Who are they? Tell me their whereabouts. I can spare your life. Ian pursed her lips and did not speak. It was not the right time yet. She could only say it after she had obtained the contract. At that time, they would not be able to do anything if she revealed her identity. However, Yin He and the rest would still come back to save her, right? Seeing that she refused to speak, the other party became angry. He kicked her, but Ian grabbed his knee and pulled her down. She jumped up from the ground and turned around to run. Hey, she's good at fighting. The other party wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Catch her. After a long period of practice, her skills were actually not that bad. However, she could not win against so many people with her bare hands. If Yin had given her a weapon to defend herself, she would not be so weak. Yin was beaten up and carried to the leader's hands. The leader looked at her and made a tisk sound. He said, "Why are you wearing a mask? Is it because it's too ugly and you don't want to scare people?" Someone beside him made a malicious guess. "Why don't you take it off and take a look?" "That's true. If you were such a thing, you won't be able to see his face. Take it off, take it off." Ian was shocked and struggled desperately. When she came to Jean Ling, Mrs. E had warned her repeatedly not to reveal her identity. If she took off the mask here, these people would not give it back to her. Even if she met her classmates in the future, they would only see Hyan's face. Then, Hyan could only be He Rufei for the rest of her life. Moreover, they might find out that she was a woman. Hyan shivered and tried to get rid of the shackles. Huh? Is he scared? Someone said, "This mute seems to be someone who likes to look beautiful." When he heard that she had to take off the mask, he became anxious. "Now that you mention it, I want to take it off even more." The leader looked at Hyan struggle and said gloomily, "Take it off." Hyan was directly pressed to the ground. Someone held her chin and forced her to raise her head. Then, someone tried to pry off the mask on her face. However, there was a mechanism on the mask. No one could open it except for her. That person tried for a long time, but the mask didn't move at all. Instead, he was tired and sweating. He looked at the leader and said, "Leader, this is not right. I can't take off the mask." "Why can't you take it off?" The leader shouted, "Let me do it." He grabbed Hyan's neck and tried to pry off the mask. However, it was impossible for him to do it. Hyan was also in pain. There was a mechanism on the mask. If someone tried to take it off by force, the harder they tried, the more uncomfortable she would feel. The people here didn't have any kindness to her. They didn't care whether she was in pain or not. Hyan only felt that her head was about to explode. She thought, "Why hasn't Yenny come yet? Why haven't they found out that I'm missing?" The leader pressed her face to the ground. The smell of mud went into his mouth. Probably because the mask covered her face, he couldn't see Hyan's crying and panicking face. The leader was in a worse mood. He ordered the two people beside him, "Hold him tightly. If I don't let him taste some pain, he won't know how powerful I am. I don't believe that there's a mouth in this world that I can't pry open." There was a series of ping, ping, pang, pang, pang sounds, as if they were looking for torture instruments. Even if they had never eaten pork, they had seen pigs run. Ian had heard a lot of these private torture cases before. "Brat," the leader used his shoe to nudge her face. "Are you still not going to talk? Are you still waiting for your accomplices to come and save you? Don't wait anymore. They won't come back. You'd better be sensible and tell them who took Wang Sheng away. That way, you can suffer less." Ian was stepped on until she couldn't move. She thought bitterly, "Yin He and the others have really forgotten about me." It was dark in the wilderness. She couldn't see the end of it. She could only hear the insects and birds in the forest. There seemed to be the sound of horse hooves. She put her ear to the ground and heard it clearly. She was startled at first, but then she gradually felt hope. She turned her head slightly and looked at the end of the wilderness. It seemed like someone was coming on a horse. "They're here? They wouldn't abandon me." Ian was ecstatic. The sound of horse hooves came closer and closer. The people in the village also heard it. Everyone was startled at first. Then they raised their torches to look at the person. Under the light of the torches, a person and a horse came closer and closer. In the end, they saw a young man wearing a white robe and a silver crown. It wasn't Yin He. It was Xiao Ju. He Yan's smile froze. Her mask covered her stunned expression. Xiao Ju pulled the reins and dismounted when he was about 10 steps away from He Yan. He had a long sword at his waist. He stood tall and straight. The silver python embroidered on his white robe shone brightly. He walked out of the darkness like a warm sun, brightening up the entire sky. The young man's gaze swept across the fierce people in the village. Finally, his gaze landed on He Yan, who was pressed to the ground. "Sorry, I'm late." Chapter 187. He Yan did not think that the person who came would be Xiao Ju. She thought that Yin He and the rest would realize that she was missing after a long time and turn around to look for her. Although the possibility of this was very small, she did not think that it would be Xiao Ju who came. Didn't he bring the other person to the governor's manor to look for the slave contract? When the leader saw Xiao Ju coming, he was also shocked. This youth was different from the youth who was wearing a mask. His appearance and clothes did not look like he was from an ordinary family. He hesitated and thought about Tong Qiushi. He did not care about anything else and shouted, "This fellow's accomplice is here. Capture him." He Yan was shocked and blurted out, "Brother Huaijin, they have many people. Run." Although Xiao Ju's skills were outstanding, there were too many people here. How could he deal with them alone? It seemed that Yin He and the rest did not follow. Things were not looking good. She was anxious and forgot her original intention. If Xiao Ju ran away now, what would she do? Xiao Ju's gaze swept past her and only curved his lips. He Yan did not understand the meaning of this smile. Then, he heard the sound of horse hooves not far away. It was exceptionally bright in the night. Yin He and the rest came? This time, He Yan guessed wrong. The people who came were not Yin He, but 10 guards. Before they came to Jinling, their families were worried that something would go wrong on the long journey. Thus, they each chose outstanding guards to protect them. Although this group of youths did not hide their visit to the brothel from the guards, they did not dare to tell them about the rescue. After all, it was too dangerous. If they told the guards, they would most likely be stopped. However, the appearance of this group of guards was a good thing. Xiao Ju was too lazy to even draw his sword. The guards behind him did not wait for his orders. The people in the manor were all Tong Qiushi's henchmen. How could they be compared to the guards who were carefully selected from the Shuo capital? In a moment, there were cries and howls. It was a mess. However, no one paid any attention to He Yan, who was pressed down on the ground. He Yan put her hands on the ground and was about to get up when she saw a pair of boots stop in front of her. She raised her head and saw the youth looking at her. He held out a hand to her. That hand was slender and white with distinct joints. It was clean and made one think of a fine jade carving. Her hands were covered in mud from the fight earlier. He Yan hesitated and did not reach out his hand. The young man seemed to be impatient. After a moment, he grabbed her elbow and pulled her up from the ground. "Thank you," she whispered. Xiao Ju's gaze fell on the whip marks on her back. She didn't say anything. In just a short while, the guards had already knocked down all the people here and tied them up like pigs. "Who hit you with a whip just now?" he asked. He Yan turned to look at him. Without waiting for her to speak, the leader cried out, "Young master, please spare my life. Young master, please spare my life. I didn't do it on purpose." "So it was you," Xiao Ju said indifferently. He unhurriedly bent down and picked up the whip that had been trampled on the ground. It was this whip that had lashed He Yan's back. He handed the whip to He Yan, hit him. "What?" He Yan didn't understand. "Treat him the way he treats you." Xiao Ju lifted the corner of his robe and lazily sat down on the chair facing the group of people. He stretched out his hand to He Yan as if he was watching a good show. "Please." He Yan looked at the whip and fell in a deep thought. He didn't hit him. The leader started to cry and howl again. He begged for mercy with tears and snot running down his face. "Why?" The youth looked at him playfully and raised his eyebrows. "You don't dare?" The leader was delighted. He thought that the masked boy looked weak and young. He might be soft-hearted. He begged again. "No." He had heard his own voice. It was small and firm. "Can I hit him a few more times?" The leader was stunned. Xiao Ju was also stunned. After a while, he said with interest, "Up to you." He Yan raised the whip. To be honest, although she was hit, she only got hit once. She said she wanted to hit him a few more times to vent her anger. She didn't want to come to Jin Ling this time. She was just being held up by Lin Xuanhe and his men. She didn't care if she came, but she had to suffer such an unexpected disaster. She felt very wronged. Since a punching bag had appeared in front of her, it would be a waste if she didn't hit him. Moreover, he wasn't a good person. He was a dog that bullied others because of his master's power. She would hit him a few more times and take it as revenge for young Master Wang and Hua Yuxian. Pa! The crisp sound of the whip echoed in the empty night. The lackeys who had been crying and crying just now didn't dare to speak anymore. Only the screams of their leader echoed in the air. Ian was very careful. She didn't hurt his bones. It hurt a little, but it was all superficial. She hit him a total of 10 times. After 10 times, the arrogant leader's face was full of tears. He was on the verge of death. He didn't even have the strength to scream. However, the masked brat obediently placed the whip in front of him and even said in a warm voice, "Sorry to offend you." The leader fainted from anger. Ian walked to Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju glanced at him. Done? Done. He nodded, stood up, turned, and walked out. If you're done, let's go. The leader fainted after receiving such a beating. Someone in the crowd gathered his courage and shouted, "You! Who are you? You're so arrogant. Aren't you afraid that the governor will find trouble with you? The governor won't let you go." The white-robed young man heard and turned around. The silver python at the corner of his robe was beautiful and evil. His eyes were cold. He laughed sarcastically. "I'm afraid that he won't come. Remember to look for me at entering Cloud's Tower. I'll be waiting for you." After saying this, he no longer paid any attention to those people and continued to walk forward, following the guards to where they came from. Ian followed beside him. When they reached the horse, Xiao Ju asked her, "Can we get on?" Ian nodded and climbed up with difficulty. As soon as she sat down, she felt that there was someone behind her. She was shocked. She didn't expect Xiao Ju to be on the same horse as her. She couldn't calm down. Firstly, Xiao Ju was a clean person. She was covered in mud. She was dirty and disheveled. However, he didn't dislike her. Secondly, he hadn't been so close to anyone for a long time because of her identity. The guards rode their horses out of the manor. Xiao Ju's horse moved slowly. They took care of her because she was injured. It was hard to bear the pain from the bumpy ride. Ian's heart warmed. The guards didn't wait for them. Unknowingly, only the two of them were left behind. Ian saw that there was no one around and asked in a small voice, "Brother Huijin, why are you here?" "It's on the way." "On the way?" They weren't even in the same direction. "What was on the way?" She was about to speak when Xiao Ju asked, "If I didn't appear, what would you do?" "Then I would betray you." Ian didn't even blink as she said, "Your father is General Guangwu." Tong Qiushi wouldn't dare to act rashly. Xiao Ju laughed in anger at her words. "You have a good plan. We are in the same boat," Ian said without changing her expression. Xiao Ju snorted and didn't continue speaking. Ian pursed her lips. Actually, if Xiao Ju didn't come, she probably wouldn't have betrayed them. She would have to hold on for as long as she could. But if she said that, wouldn't it seem like she was easy to bully? She had to let Yin He and the others know that she was very fierce. She would be very angry and condemn them for abandoning their friends. After some time, the road in front of them was no longer a wilderness. It became bustling and lively. They arrived at the city. The guards had probably left after receiving Xiao Ju's orders. Xiao Ju found an inn and dismounted with He Yin. They walked into the inn. "Wait." He Yin grabbed her sleeve. "Brother Huijin, aren't we going to meet up with Brother Nanguang and the others? What are we going to do? Stay at an inn?" Xiao Ju sized her up. "Are you sure you want to meet Yin Nanguang and the others like this?" He Yin was stunned. Only then did she remember that she was beaten up in the village. Not to mention her injuries, her clothes were also dirty. She mumbled, "I see." "Thank you, Brother Huijin." Xiao Ju called for a room and asked the inn's waiter to get hot water. He Yin became nervous again and said to him, "Brother Huijin, when I'm bathing, I don't like people around. Can you leave me alone for a while?" Xiao Ju looked at her in disbelief. "I'm your servant?" Ian, you're thinking too much. He mocked. "You can bathe yourself, but what about applying medicine?" Those are all minor injuries. It's not a big deal. He said, "You're very strange." He stared into Hyeon's eyes and took a step forward. Hyeon raised her head and looked back at him nervously. Xiao Ju said thoughtfully, "Your guard are also too cold to you." When they came to Jinling this time, all the youths were accompanied by their families' guards. These youths were of high status and were valued by their families. The guard were always worried about them. But on the way here, Hirufei's guards were the only ones who were especially cold. Well, they weren't cold, but they weren't very close. For example, tonight, if it were Lin Shuanghe's guards and they knew that Lin Shuanghe was injured, they would have called for a doctor to personally treat Lin Shuanghe. But Hirufei's guards didn't even ask. Hirufei was treated coldly in the He family. But Hirufei was He Yuanqing's eldest son, so it wasn't to this extent. Hyeon's heart jumped. She didn't expect Xiao Ju to notice this. But how could she explain that she was a girl? Not many people in the He family knew about it. Those guards were also ordered by He Yuanshang to not get too close to her. But this became a fatal flaw. Hyeon tried her best to appear calm. "I have a cold personality and don't like to have too much contact with people. I told them not to get close to me." Even a child wouldn't believe her words. Xiao Ju lowered his eyes to look at her. After a while, he nodded and said, "Okay." He ordered the innkeeper to send in clean clothes and medicine for injuries. He went out and left the room to Hyeon. After Xiao Ju left, Hyeon finally let out a sigh of relief. Dealing with Xiao Ju always made people nervous. It was probably because he was sharp and handsome. Just like the giant python with silver scales embroidered on the corner of his robe, he was beautiful yet dangerous, indifferent yet cold. She soaked her whole body in hot water, and the warm feeling gradually calmed her flustered mood. Thinking about what had happened tonight, she gradually recalled a secret excitement. She was still a child in her teens. No matter how obedient she was normally, she still wanted to take an adventure. Although she was beaten up badly, she thought that Yin He and the others had already rescued young Master Wang. Since Xiao Ju was here, it meant that the matter of the contract was going smoothly. The Flower Fairy's request was almost half successful. Even after many years, when he thought of this matter, it was enough to make him proud and happy. She washed her body and applied a layer of medicine on her back with difficulty in front of the mirror. Then she changed into the clothes that the innkeeper sent over. She carefully took off her mask. Just now, the people from the manor came to forcefully take off her mask. Although they didn't succeed, they made the mask tighten. There were marks on her face and faint bruises at the corner of her mouth. He sighed. She used a handkerchief to wipe her face. She was shocked when she heard someone knocking on the door. She hurriedly put on her mask and said, "Coming." Then she opened the door. The door opened and Xiao Ju walked in. He glanced at her and said, "Done?" Hyeon nodded. His gaze fell on Hyeon. He suddenly pulled the corners of his mouth. "There is something I am very curious about." Hyeon instinctively replied, "What is it? Did you really wear a mask because you're ugly?" He asked slowly. Under the bright light, the youth's silhouette was beautiful. His eyes were as moving as autumn water, but they were bright as if they could see through everything. Hyeon almost cried out in that instant. But immediately, she kept her biggest secret. Of course, she even mimicked Xiao Ju and laughed coldly. Not everyone is as handsome as Brother Huaijin. Second young master Xiao choked when he heard first young master He, who had always done things quietly, suddenly explode with anger. Then, he raised his eyebrows and said carelessly, "That's true." He turned and called Hyeon, "Since you're done, let's go." Hyeon asked, "Where are we going?" "Entering Cloud's Tower." Entering Cloud's Tower was brightly lit. In the attic, Hua Yuxian looked nervously at the door. A group of youths were sitting in a room. A scholarly-looking youth was lying on the bed. This youth was very frail and delicate. He had already changed his clothes, but there were still scars on his face. At first glance, he looked a bit disheveled. At this moment, his eyes were tightly closed, and he was sleeping. I have roughly bandaged and applied medicine for him. Lin Shuanghe waved his fan. They are all superficial wounds. But this Master Wang's body is too weak, so he looks a bit scary. After some rest, he'll be fine. Then, he muttered, he said he would only practice medicine for women in the future. He made an exception before he finished his apprenticeship. Ah, Hua Yuxian bowed to Lin Shuanghe. Thank you, young Master Lin. It is my duty. Miss Yuxian, no need to be so polite. Lin Shuanghe smiled. He always had a good attitude towards girls. Tong Qiushi only wanted to torture Wang Sheng. He did not want to kill him right from the start. After all, he wanted to keep Wang Sheng alive to threaten Hua Yuxian, so Wang Sheng was still alive. The door opened. Everyone's eyes brightened, but quickly dimmed. It was Madame Ding. Madame Ding panicked. She twisted her handkerchief and said in a low voice, Yuxian, why don't you take Wang Sheng away from Jinling before Master Tong finds out? When this group of people brought the injured Wang Sheng into Cloud's tower, Madame Ding was also shocked. But if she chased him out now, Wang Sheng would undoubtedly die. She had no choice but to let them in. Madame Ding did not know the identities of these young masters. She only knew that they were rich young masters from Jinling City who wanted to have fun and come to the rescue of injustice. But while this was fun, there were endless consequences. She was absent-mindedly dealing with the guests downstairs. Finally, she felt that she could not hide the truth. This was no small matter, so she went upstairs to talk. Hua Yuxian shook her head. We can hide now, but we can't hide forever. Moreover, if Yuxian and Master Wang leave, what will you do? Tong Qiushi will definitely not let Cloud's tower go. Since he dared to set fire to Cloud's tower once, he will dare to do it again. Will he disregard the lives of the other sisters for Yuxian? Then what do you want to do? Madame Ding panicked. Tong Qiushi wants me. Hua Yuxian glanced at Wang Sheng on the bed. Her expression softened. As long as I listen to him and beg him, Master Wang will be saved. At least he can leave Yangzhou safely. Besides, Hua Yuxian hesitated. There's a young master who hasn't returned yet. If he falls into the hands of those villains, and I leave with Sir Wang, they might vent their anger on the young master. If I stay here, Tong Qiushi may let them go for my sake. When she said this, the expressions of the youths in the room changed. That's not necessary. A voice sounded. Then the door opened. Two youths walked in. The white-robed youth in front looked lazy. It's not to the point of sacrificing you. Huaijin, brother He. Suddenly, a clamor of voices rang out in the room. Then, all the youngsters gathered around with a hula sound. I knew that Brother Huaijin would definitely be able to rescue Brother He. Brother He is blessed by the heavens. How could he be so easily caught? Brother He, are you all right? Are you hurt? Ian was stunned. It was the first time she was treated like the moon surrounded by stars. It was also the first time she was cared for like this. For a moment, he was overwhelmed by the favor and almost forgot about the fact that he had been abandoned. Ian shuffled forward and scratched his head. His expression was very uncomfortable. He walked in front of her and said sorry. Ian stilled. At that time, I was too panicked. Speaking of this, Yanhee's expression was vexed. I only cared about taking Master Wang away. I thought you would follow. I didn't think. He could not explain himself. He Rufei was really an insignificant person in the Xianchang dojo. For a proud son of heaven like him, He Rufei did not even enter his eyes. This time in Jinling City, He Rufei did not participate too much in the youth's activities. Sometimes, if he did not take the initiative to speak, everyone would have forgotten that He Rufei was in this group of people. Therefore, when the villager made his move, none of them remembered that there was a sentry around. When they met up with the other group, Xiaoju looked at them and asked with a frown, "Why don't I see He Rufei?" At this time, Yanhee and the rest remembered that they seemed to have forgotten about He Rufei. Yanhee was about to look for him when he was stopped by Xiaoju. Xiaoju looked at him lightly and said, "I'll go." The look made him feel ashamed and unable to show his face. How could he leave his classmate behind? Was this what a gentleman would do? Moreover, He Rufei's skills were extremely weak, and he was as timid as a mouse. If he fell into the group of people, he would not have a good time. The more he thought about it, the more scared he became. He was about to get on the horse when Xiaoju pulled him down. "I'll go," Yanhee said. "You can't do it alone. They have a lot of people." "I'll go with the guards," Xiaoju said lightly. "You take the others to entering Cloud's restaurant." Yanhee stared blankly as Xiaoju rode the horse, and disappeared at the end of the street. His heart felt extremely uncomfortable. After arriving at Entering Cloud's restaurant, he did not have the heart to do other things. He was thinking about He Rufei and was afraid that Xiao Ju would not be able to save him if she was late, or not be able to save him at all. Until this moment, seeing He Rufei appear safe and sound, Yanhee's heart finally relaxed. What followed was endless guilt and disdain towards himself. "Hit me." The young man raised his head, his ponytail bouncing up and down. He was clearly apologizing, but he also showed an arrogant attitude. "I'm sorry." Ian looked at him in shock and wanted to laugh. She held back her laughter and said, "It's okay. Brother Huijin came to save me. They did not have time to beat me up. I did not lose anything." Xiao Ju's eyes moved slightly and laughed, but did not expose or lie. Hearing He Yan's words, Yanhee breathed a sigh of relief and felt much better. A youth asked, "Brother Huijin, now that everyone is here and the contract is in our hands, Master Wang has been saved, what should we do next?" Mother Ding was anxious. "Since everyone is here, let's quickly send Master Wang out of Jinling." She knew that Hua Yuxian was right. Hua Yuxian was the most important. If Hua Yuxian left with them, the entire Entering Clouds restaurant would be in trouble. If they sent Wang Xing out, at least his trip would not be in vain. Hua Yuxian nodded and walked to Wang Sheng's side. Looking at her lover's face, her eyes were filled with longing and tears. After this parting, the mountains were high and the rivers were long. They would never meet again in this lifetime. She was just about to help Wang Sheng up when suddenly a sword blocked in front of her. Hua Yuxian looked up and saw the most handsome youth in the white robe sitting on the chair. He did not look at her and pointed the tip of his sword at her, blocking her way with the sword hilt. "No need." "Young master." Hua Yuxian did not understand. The youth looked at her calmly and smiled. "Why are you running? They will be here soon." "What?" Mother Ding was shocked and trembled. "Who are they?" As if to prove his words, in the next moment, there was a hurried knock on the door. The door was pushed open and the girl called Kai Lian, whom they had met before, rushed in. She said in a panic, "Mother, traveling immortal, bad news." Master Tong brought the officers from the governor's residence and surrounded Entering Cloud's restaurant. He said that Entering Cloud's restaurant is hiding a criminal and helping the villain. He wants us to hand him over quickly. What should we do? Mother Ding turned to look at them and was terrified. What should we do? Chapter 188. Below the Cloud Entering restaurant, it was completely surrounded. The guests had all been chased out, and the soldiers blocked the entrance. The girl stood on both sides in fear, looking uneasily at the man in the lead. It was a man wearing a dark green robe with gold lining. His clothes were extremely exquisite and luxurious, but the more luxurious it was, the more it made his face look shabbier. He was extremely tall and strong, and his skin was very dark. His eyes were almost a slit, and his face was oily. Standing there, he looked fierce and barbaric, and his expression was fierce. This was the younger brother of the governor's wife, that young master Tong Qiushi. Tong Qiushi scolded, "Go capture him." The next moment, someone's voice sounded. Using the word capture, this young master does not seem very polite. Tong Qiushi looked up and saw a group of people coming down leisurely. The one who spoke was a 15 or 16-year-old youth. He had a graceful bearing and held a folding fan in his hand. He even had a gentle and refined smile on his face, even though that smile was very dazzling. Walking with him were several youths. They were about the same age as him, and all of them were handsome and had an extraordinary bearing. Hua Yuxian and Mother Ding walked behind those youths. At a glance, it looked like those youths were protecting her behind them. "Little bastard, you are the ones who took away Wang? You came to this young master's manor and smashed it?" Tong Qiushi asked fiercely. He was having fun outside when he suddenly heard that a thief had entered the manor. Before he had time to be surprised, he received another piece of news that Wang Sheng had been taken away from the manor. Tong Qiushi immediately ordered people to search for Hua Yuxian's body contract in the study. It really was gone. He was shocked and furious. He was shocked that someone dared to mess with him, and furious that a small merchant dared to be so arrogant. Without another word, Tong Qiushi did not even have time to change his clothes before he led his men into the cloud entering in. Hey, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. Lin Shuanghe looked at him with a smile. What proof do you have that we did it? What proof? Of course, it was because this group of people had actually swaggered around and told people to look for them at entering Cloud's restaurant. Tong Qiushi had never seen such a fearless person. Which family are you from? Tong Qiushi narrowed his eyes. Are you tired of living? And you? He looked at Hua Yuxian. Bitch, it's your fortune that I've taken a liking to you. You've challenged my patience time and time again, and even colluded with outsiders to commit such shameless acts. Today, I'm going to catch all of you in one fell swoop and throw you into jail. I'm going to make you beg for death. I'm going to let you know the consequences of offending someone you shouldn't have. As soon as these words were spoken, a young man behind Lin Shuanghe couldn't help but laugh out loud. When he realized that everyone was looking at him, he waved his hand in embarrassment. Sorry. I just thought it was funny. And he lost interest and said, can't these ruffians change the way they talk when they talk tough? It's always the same. I'm really sick of hearing it. Tong Qiushi was furious that they didn't care about him like this. Take him down. The officers and soldiers behind her immediately stepped forward. Mrs. Ding was shocked. At this moment, suddenly, dozens of guards in black rushed out from all directions of entering Cloud's tower like ghosts. They stood in front of the youths and silently pulled out the sabers at their waists. The sabers shone brightly. In an instant, cold light overflowed and a murderous aura filled the air. The girls in the restaurant jumped in fright and screamed in unison. Hua Yuxian also couldn't help but grip the corners of her skirt and look in shock at the youths in front of her. And he tilted his head and played with the ponytail that hung in front of his chest. He said, boring. No one knew where these guards had come from or when they had sneaked into Cloud entering restaurant. Other than Xiao Ju, these guards were all under his orders after they returned from the village. They must have received his orders and have been hiding here. How dare you? Tong Qiushi was also shocked. He was used to being a tyrant in Jinling. Even the rich families of Jinling didn't dare to act rashly in front of him because of his brother-in-law. He didn't expect to bite a hard bone this time. Not only did they kidnap people right under his nose, even now, with the soldiers at the door, they still dared to call people to fight. Swords were drawn and bows were on the verge of breaking out. Tong Qiushi stepped back. Although he was a tyrant, to him, he was a useless person who didn't know anything. He was afraid that these guards would implicate him. He said, this is looking down on an official of the imperial court. Take them down now, regardless of whether they live or die. Yang Mingji stood out and said warmly, Young master, you don't have an official position. We are looking down on an official of the imperial court. You kidnapped my people. Putting aside whether or not young Master Wang was kidnapped by us, he's from Yangzhou and not your servant. How can he be your people? Could it be that you set up a torture chamber and imprison people for no reason? If we're talking about this, the one who broke the law is you. Yang Mingji was good at arguing. How could Tong Qiushi win against him? He was forced to the point where he couldn't say anything. He became angry out of humiliation and said, don't waste time with them. Kill them. Kill. Someone spoke. His voice was light, as if he found it funny. He tilted his head and said, are you sure? This youth was very tall. Even if he wasn't standing at the front, he could be seen at a glance. In addition, his appearance was outstanding. It was hard for people to ignore him. He stood lazily and said lightly, if you say kill first, then we will attack. Even if we kill you, it's just to protect ourselves. It's not considered murder. If you want to compete, who will die first? You or us? He looked at Tong Qiushi with a half-smile. Being looked at by those clear eyes, Tong Qiushi couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. He didn't know where this group of people came from or what their identities were. He was hesitant at first, but when he saw Hua Yuxian standing in the crowd, he became bold. No matter who they were, Jinling was his territory. He couldn't let a bunch of immature brats laugh at him. Everyone in the city knew that he was going to support Hua Yuxian. If he didn't settle this today, and Hua Yuxian appeared in Sunrise Restaurant safe and sound, or with Wang Sheng, he would become the laughing stock of Jinling City. When had Tong Qiushi ever suffered like this? His face darkened. He gritted his teeth and said, "Kill." Before he could finish, another voice came from outside the door. "Stop. Everyone stop." Everyone turned around and saw a middle-aged man in an official's robe striding in. When they saw this person, the girls in the restaurant and Madame Ding quickly bowed and said respectfully, "Lord Liu." This was the governor of Jinling City, Liu Rui. When Tong Qiushi saw Liu Rui, he immediately went forward. He was tall and strong, but he acted like a child in front of Liu Rui. "Brother-in-law, you're finally here. These little bastards kidnapped my people and are still so arrogant. Now they dare to attack the soldiers. Brother-in-law, they don't care about you at all." Liu Rui said angrily. "Shut up." Tong Qiushi was stunned. He didn't say anything. He looked at Liu Rui. This Jinling City's governor looked different from his scoundrel brother-in-law. He had the appearance of a scholar, and even had a bit of a righteous aura. However, looking at how much he indulged his relatives, it was obvious that he was a hypocrite. Liu Rui saluted everyone in the hall and said, "I'm sorry. Qiushi is young and reckless. This is all a misunderstanding. Miss Yuxian, are you hurt?" Hua Yuxian did not expect this arrogant and unapproachable governor to ask her so kindly today. She was confused for a moment and replied, "Thank you for your concern. Everything is fine with Yuxian." Tong Qiushi was furious. These people came to cause trouble, but his brother-in-law didn't side with him. Why was he being so nice to that bitch? Madame Ding, on the other hand, saw through the situation. She glanced at the group of youths and sighed. Her daughter was lucky to have met such a noble person. "That's good." Liu Rui smiled and looked at the others. He asked, "Young masters, you're not from Jinling, right? Where are you from? What are you doing in Jinling?" Liu Rui's heart was pounding. Tonight, he was outside when he heard someone report that a thief had broken into the governor's residence. Liu Rui was shocked. Why would someone want to attack the governor's residence? Later, the servant reported that the flower Yoshin's contract was lost. Liu Rui had also heard about Tong Qiushi's matter. However, he had always turned a blind eye to these matters and allowed Tong Qiushi to bully others. This time, Liu Rui originally thought that it was Wang Sheng who sent people to take revenge. At first, he was angry. A small merchant dared to be so impudent. However, later, a servant sent an invitation saying that it was found in the study. It was probably left behind by the person who came. Liu Rui was stunned when he saw the invitation. It was an invitation to the Jinling poetry meet. The person who was invited was called Yin He. He came from the left and right vanguard commander's residence. He was just the governor of Jinling. He didn't dare to be compared to a primary second-rank high official in Shuajing. Liu Rui was a smart person. The person who came didn't leave anything behind except for this poetry meet invitation. It was obvious that he was purposely showing his identity. He didn't dare to interfere. Before he could warn Tong Qiushi not to act rashly, he heard that Tong Qiushi had brought soldiers to block the person at entering Cloud's restaurant. Liu Rui was so frightened that he immediately rushed over. Luckily, he was able to stop them before they acted. "Sir is very perceptive. We are indeed not from Jinling." Yang Mingji gave a modest smile. "We came from Shuajing to Jinling specifically to attend the Jinling poetry meet." It really was a poetry meet. Liu Rui had an idea. He just didn't know which Vanguard commander's son was in this group. His mind was in turmoil, but he didn't show it on his face. He only smiled and said, "Jinling City is really lucky to have such important guests like the young masters." "I don't think so." Lin Shuanghe waved his fan. "Just now, Sir's relative was yelling at us. It scared us to death. He also called us little bastards." Lin Shuanghe pretended to be distressed as he thought. "In my life, it was the first time someone called me that. Why go back? I'll tell my father and see if he will be angry. After all, I'm a little bastard and he's..." Liu Rui was sweating like rain. He kicked Tong Qiushi to the ground and scolded, "Disrespectful. Hurry and apologize to the young master." Tong Qiushi was kicked unexpectedly. He was furious. He didn't know Yan He's identity and wasn't as nervous as Lu Rue. He struggled and said, "They kidnapped my people. Not to mention that Wang Sheng. They also stole Hua Yoxian's body contract. The body contract you were talking about is this?" And he took out a piece of paper from his sleeve. When he saw this piece of paper, Tong Qiushi said, "Yes, this is it. You really did steal it." Young Master Tong's words are wrong. This body contract has always been in Entering Cloud's tower. After all, Ding Mama has raised Lady Yuxian for so many years. If it's yours, how much silver did young Master Tong spend? Is there a record of it in the accounts? Tong Qiushi couldn't speak. He was used to doing business without any cost. Even women were the same. He had taken a fancy to Hua Yuxian and forced Ding Mama to give him the body contract without spending a single cent. When he asked about the silver and the accounts, of course there was no trace. Lin Shuanghe laughed. Could it be that Ding Mama gave Lady Yuxian to you of her own accord? Such a living person, and she gave it to you for free. In our Shuo Jing, even if you give a cat or a dog, you have to give something in return. What, in your Jinling, you can give it away for free. Or, he changed the topic and his smile became brighter. Is this how it is in the governor's residence? This was accusing him of being greedy and accepting bribes. Lu Rue's expression changed. Without waiting for Tong Qiushi to retort, he immediately said, "This kid must be crazy to speak nonsense. The body contract is naturally in Lady Yuxian's hands. As for Lady Yuxian being Tong Qiushi's person, that is nonsense. Lady Yuxian is from Entering Cloud's tower. The entire Jinling city knows that. She has nothing to do with our Lu family." Tong Qiushi still wanted to speak, but Lu Rue's quick-witted servant had already stepped forward and used a handkerchief to gag him. Yang Mingji's expression was gentle, as if he really believed Lu Rue's words. He kindly said, "I see. However, official Lu should teach your own cousin well, since he has nothing to do with Lady Yuxian. Yet he goes around saying that Lady Yuxian is from her Lu family. He even wants to kill us. In this way, won't Lord Lu be blamed for all the evil that young Master Tong does in the future? As the saying goes, one's glory is glory, one's loss is loss. Others will not differentiate between official Lu and young Master Tong. It will all be counted as official Lu's fault." This was a warning to him. Lu Rue broke out in cold sweat. Before he could think of a response, the young man with a high ponytail gave him a sideways glance and said in an unfriendly tone, "The flower fairy is our friend. Whoever bullies the flower fairy is going against us." He turned to Hua Yuxian. Although his eyes were looking at the beauty, his words were directed at Lu Rue and the others. "Lady Yuhua, if anyone makes trouble for you in the future, you can ask the commander of Shuo Jing's vanguard to find me at the Yin residence. I will definitely stand up for you." "And me?" Lin Shuanghe smiled and said, "Although our Lin family has no soldiers, we know a few people in the palace. My grandfather often sees the Empress Dowager. Our Lin family can protect you for such a small matter. My father is the Minister of Internal Affairs, the Minister of Imperial Servants, the Minister of Revenue." Every time these youths said a name, Lu Rue's heart would tremble. In just a moment, his clothes were all soaked in sweat. Whether they were lying or not, he only needed to ask around at the Jinling poetry meet to find out. But even without asking, Lu Rue believed 80% of it. They all looked heroic and proud. If they were not from high officials, they would not dare to be so arrogant. They seemed to be talking to Hua Yuxian, but they were actually warning her. Lu Rue felt bitter. Who would have thought that a woman from a brothel could make so many young masters from high officials support her? Lu Rue squeezed out a smile and said, "Young masters, what are you talking about? Lady Yuhua is from Jinling. If anyone dares to bully her, Yingtian Prefecture will be the first to disagree. Why should we trouble young masters?" Lin Shuanghe smiled slightly. "Official Lu, you have to remember what you said today. A man's words cannot be taken back." Lu Rue said seriously, "The entire Cloud Entering Tower can testify for me." "Very good." And he raised an eyebrow. "You are finally pleasing to the eye. Lu Rue was angry at his disrespectful attitude, but he did not dare to say anything. Yang Mingji bowed to him. Then in the future, please take care of Cloud entering tower and our friend, Lady Yuhua. Of course, of course. Lu Rue smiled. After a while of probing and exchanging greetings, Lu Rue took Tong Qiushi and the soldiers and left. Tonight, when he returned to the Lu family, how to teach Tong Qiushi a lesson was his business. Inside Cloud entering tower, Kai Lian closed the door. The tower exploded with cheers. The girls were very happy. Tong Qiushi had done many evil things in Jinling. The girls were angry but did not dare to say anything. Because of the Lady Yuhua incident, everyone was worried and afraid. Now that the dust had settled, Lu Rue left resentfully after being snubbed. It really made people proud. The Lady Yuhua walked in front of the youths. She was also very excited. With tears in her eyes, she suddenly knelt down and kowtowed to everyone. She said loudly, "Yuhua is unable to repay the great kindness of the young masters. If there is a next life, I will definitely work like an ox or a horse. I will not refuse. Lady Yu Xian, please rise." Everyone was shocked. They scrambled to pull her up. They were somewhat proud, but also a little uncomfortable. They all said, "This is what we should do. A real man should help when he sees injustice. The teachers in our academy teach us this. That Tong Qiushi is really despicable. But with us here, you do not need to fear them in the future." Mother Ding looked at them and could not help but smile. She wondered what this group of youths was like. Although they all had their own little tempers, they did not have the frivolity of the aristocrats. Although ordinary people pursued and adored, they were mostly disdainful of the brothel girls. They would not take the initiative to say things like "they are our friends." However, they spoke frankly and naturally, without the slightest hesitation. The Jinling poetry competition this time invited famous scholars from Dawei. Scholars from all over the world would gather here. Everyone had their own strengths. But this time, the youths from Shuajing Academy won. The boat docked. Ian and the group walked down. The Lady Yuhua smiled and said, "Young masters, please follow me." So much time had passed. With the age of Xiao Ju and the rest, they could not be called young masters. But the Lady Yuhua still used the title from the past. Ian was momentarily dazed. It was as if this was still the summer of the past. They came to Jinling together on a boat and secretly sneaked into the brothel. They were shocked by the beauty of spring inside. The Cloud Brothel was still the Cloud Brothel, but it looked much older. The signboard at the door was rewritten, but it was not as lively as before. Lin Shuanghe pointed at the signboard. These words, "There was a heavy rain last year." The Lady Yuhua smiled and said, "I heard that the signboard at the door was blown off. Mother sent someone to rewrite it, but I also feel that it is not as good as before. It used to be grand, but now it was neat and beautiful. It was not the old building of the past." They walked in with the group. Seeing the Lady Yuhua leading a group of people in, the girls inside were stunned. An older girl came forward and asked, "Lady Yuhua, look who this is?" The Lady Yuhua smiled and said. The girl looked at her in confusion. Ian also looked at her and was stunned. This girl was Kai Lian. She had also grown up a little. She did not have the same delicate attitude as before. She looked cold and elegant. Kai Lian looked at them in confusion for a while. She suddenly said, "They are the young masters from the past." That's right. Lin Shuanghe still remembered Kai Lian. He opened his fan and said with a smile, "Lady Kai Lian, it has been so many years. It can be seen that everyone still misses you." Kai Lian was also slightly excited. Day after day in the Cloud Brothel, there was not much difference. The matter of making Tong Qiushi suffer that year was probably the most shocking experience they had ever had in their lives. Those young masters from Shuajing all came from noble families that they did not even dare to imagine. They did not look down on them like normal young masters, and even said that they were friends. Occasionally, Kai Lian would wonder if that was just a dream. Now that she saw old friends, Kai Lian was so excited she could not speak. "We have guests. Go tell the kitchen to make a table of good food and wine." The Lady Yuhua smiled and said, "We will not leave until we are drunk." Kai Lian responded and hurried to the kitchen. The girls at the side looked at them curiously. Lin Shuanghe looked around. He did not see Mother Ding and asked, "Where did Mother Ding go? Since she is an old friend, we should say hello to her." Hearing this, the Lady Yohua's eyes dimmed. After a while, she said, "Mother Ding is no longer here." It turned out that 2 years after the Lady Yuhua went to Yangzhou with Wang Sheng, Mother Ding caught a cold and could not get out of bed. It was originally thought to be a minor illness, but it got worse and worse. In the end, it looked like she was about to die. Mother Ding did not have any children. In the cloud brothel, the one she loved the most was the Lady Yuhua. Kyle Yin wrote a letter to the Lady Yuhua. When the Lady Yuhua heard the news, she wanted to rush back to visit. But at that time, she was already married to Wang Sheng. Although the Wang family was a business, they did not lack rules. Not to mention that she had to rush back to Jinling. Even the cloud brothel did not allow her to have anything to do with it. The Lady Yuhua was trapped in Yangzhou and could not go out. She did not make it in time to see Mother Ding one last time. Mother Ding left with regrets. Before she left, she gave the cloud brothel to Kyle Yin. Now, Kyle Yin was the Mother Lien of the cloud brothel. When everyone heard this, they could not help but sigh. That shrewd and fierce woman with a soft heart was no longer here. Chapter 189. In entering Cloud's tower, it was not as lively as it was many years ago. Kyle Yin explained with a smile. After Mother Ding passed away, many girls in entering Cloud's tower left. Those who got married, and those who went home went home. Kyle Yin did not find other girls to come in. There was no lack of brothels in the city. After Hua Yuxian went to Yangzhou, entering Cloud's tower's business was not as good as before. After the girls left, it was almost deserted. There's nothing bad about it. Usually, everyone will do some other rouge and face powder business to earn some money. It's enough to make do with the days. Kyle Yin said with a smile. It's just that the sisters have nowhere else to go. Entering Cloud's tower was built by Mother. It's also the sisters' home. People should have a contented heart. It was very good for them to be like this now. Hua Yuxian invited everyone to sit down in the banquet hall. She first ordered people to prepare the food and wine. She asked Yin He and the others, "What are the young masters doing now?" A few years had passed. The youths had already grown into young people. They no longer had the youthful appearance of the past, but it could be seen that each of them had extraordinary experiences. "I am now a doctor." Lin Shuanghe lightly waved his folding fan and said seriously, "But I am only a female doctor. Thanks to the love of the world, I received the beautiful title of white-clothed divine hands. I am very ashamed." He looked at Lin Shuanghe in surprise. Even though Lin Shuanghe usually spoke without thinking, but since they reunited, it was the first time he saw him showing off. It was probably in front of the people he admired when he was young. He always wanted to perform better. This one is even more impressive. He pointed at Yin He with his fan. "Guide Zhonglong Generals Yin." Kyle Yin was extremely surprised. The young masters are very impressive now. And he was inexplicably uncomfortable. He touched his ponytail and snorted. "Not as impressive as General Feng Yin." "General Feng Yin?" Hua Yuxian was stunned. Following Yin He's gaze, she saw Xiao Ju calmly drinking tea. "Young Master Xiao. Is the present General Feng Yin?" Lin Shuanghe? "Yes." Hua Yuxian and Kyle Yin gasped at the same time. Back then, the group of youths had introduced themselves. Only this one and one of the masked youths had not spoken. At that time, everyone thought that it was either because their identities were too important to be revealed or because their identities were ordinary and not worth mentioning. However, Hua Yuxian felt that with the white-robed youth's outstanding looks and grace, he was the first type. Now that so many years had passed, no one would have expected him to be Do Wei's famous Right Army commander. This one is even more coincidental. Lin Shuanghe pointed at Yang Mingji and said jokingly, "Now, your Jinling city's governor is this Lord Yang." Yang Mingji moved his lips, but in the end, he didn't say anything. Hua Yuxian and Kyle Yin didn't know the story, but they were very happy. Looks like young Master Yang and Jinling City are really fated. What a coincidence. That's right, Lin Shuanghe snorted. What a coincidence. These two young masters look a little unfamiliar. Hua Yuxian looked at He Yin and Chu Zhao and said curiously, "This is their first time in Jinling," Lin Shuanghe explained. "This one's surname is Chu. You can call him Young Master Chu. This one is my good friend. At a young age, he was personally appointed as Muan Lang by His Majesty. He is also the subordinate of Military Governor Shao. His name is He Yin." "Young Master Chu, Young Master He." Hua Yuxian smiled and bowed. "Since this is your first time in Jinling City, you must try the food and wine of Entering Cloud's restaurant." Lin Shuanghe's eyes lit up at these words. "Miss Yuxian, is the chef of Entering Cloud's restaurant the same person from back then?" Hua Yuxian smiled and nodded. "The food and wine were all made by the sisters in the restaurant. It is exactly the same as before. If the young masters like it, everyone will be very happy." Ian still remembered that the food and wine of Entering Cloud's restaurant was indeed superb. It was completely different from the restaurants in Shuajing. It was sweet and mellow, leaving a rich aftertaste. After she returned to Shuajing, the He family did not treat her badly. However, she had never tasted the same delicacies as in Entering Cloud's restaurant. While they were exchanging greetings, it was not long before someone brought the food and wine to the long table. They were all home-cooked dishes: duck oil sesame seed cakes, plum blossom cakes, small wontons, red bean yuan shao, pork fat dumplings. They were golden and fragrant. After arriving in Jinling City in the afternoon, He Yin had not eaten yet. He was already hungry. Seeing that everyone was only focused on talking, he endured it. In the end, he could not help but silently raise his chopsticks and eat the smoked fish silver thread noodles in front of him. The silver thread noodles were thin and soft. It melted in his mouth. Once it was steaming hot, all the cravings in his stomach came out. Seeing that no one was paying attention, He Yin picked up a crystal bun. Lin Shuanghe was talking to Hua Yuxian about the interesting things that happened in the past few years. Where did the youth from Xianchang restaurant go? While He Yin listened, he did not stop eating. His hands did not stop, and he grabbed a piece of floury bun. The food was naturally delicious, especially after the days in Rundu where even dry biscuits were not enough to fill their stomachs. Even tofu pudding had become more precious than imperial cuisine. He Yin saw a plate of glutinous rice lotus root on the other end of a long table, and he was a little restless. Entering Cloud's restaurant's glutinous rice lotus root was sweet and delicious. When he took a bite, it was as if he was biting down on a small bridge over flowing water, a clear breeze, and a bright moon in Jiangnan. She loved to eat this very much in the past. She still remembered the first time she came to Entering Cloud's restaurant. That plate of glutinous rice lotus root was eaten clean by her. Therefore, she wanted to secretly pick up a piece to taste while everyone was talking. She wanted to see if it still tasted the same as before. Unfortunately, this plate of glutinous rice lotus root was unfortunately placed on the long table at the furthest end from her. He Yin struggled to raise her chopsticks, trying to reach out with her long hands. Unfortunately, she was too far away. If she sought to pick up the food, it would be too rude. After trying a few times, she had no choice but to give up. She sighed in her heart. In the next moment, she suddenly saw a piece of glutinous rice lotus root appear in the bowl in front of her. He Yin was stunned. She saw Xiao Ju put down his chopsticks, as if he was not the one who had just done this. He also did not look at He Yin. He tilted his head and listened to Lin Shuanghe talk. It was as if doing this was just a casual action, and he did not take it to heart. He Yin's ears turned slightly red. Before she could think of what to do next, she saw another piece of glutinous rice lotus root appear in her bowl. She was stunned. She subconsciously raised her head and met Chu Zhao's smiling face. The conversation at the table had stopped at some point. He Yin's bowl suddenly had 2 more pieces of glutinous rice lotus root. Everyone at the table was staring at her. Their gazes were unclear. He Yin's vision darkened. What was this? She just wanted to quietly pick up a snack to eat. How did she become the center of everyone's attention? Chu Zhao was smiling warmly as usual. Xiao Ju was looking at her calmly. It made her feel as if she was sitting on pins and needles. Yinny frowned and looked at her for a while. He tapped the edge of the bowl with his chopsticks and said, "I want to ask, Muan Lang, are you a relative of the royal family? Yin, no. If you are not, Yin, he asked in disbelief. Why would the two of them, he pointed at Xiao Ju with his chopsticks and then at Chu Zhao, act like they are fighting for attention? Yin was horrified when he heard the word fighting for attention. Before she could think of a reply, Lin Shuanghe had already left. He reached out his chopsticks and took away the piece of glutinous rice lotus root that Chu Zhao had given to Yin. He smiled and said, "Ah, I love glutinous rice lotus root the most. Fourth young master Chu, you know me best. It's so good." He took a bite. "It's so sweet." "Thank you, fourth young master Chu." When Chu Zhao saw this, he was slightly stunned. Then he smiled and shook his head. He did not say anything. Yin then heaved a sigh of relief. Lin Shuanghe was a smart person. Fortunately, he managed to smooth things over. Otherwise, who knew what Xiao Ju would think of her in her heart? However, Chu Zhao was also strange. Why did he suddenly put food in her bowl? If others saw this, they would inevitably find it strange. However, Hua Yuxian seemed to have noticed something. She smiled and clapped her hands. A young lady with a falling horse bun came forward with a small jar of wine. "Young masters, you haven't had Cloud Restaurant's Bifong wine for a long time." She placed a jar of wine on the table. "This jar of Bifong wine is the last one left this year." The young lady brought a few glass cups. Once the Bifong wine was poured into the cups, it was green and sparkling, and its fragrance assailed their nostrils. Ian still remembered that when he was young, the wine in Cloud Restaurant was sweet and refreshing. It made people slightly tipsy, but not too drunk. He was looking forward to it. When a young lady was about to pour the wine into the cup in front of Yin, Xiao Ju glanced at her and suddenly said, "Give her a bowl of milk." Yin was speechless. The young lady who poured the wine was also stunned. She looked at Xiao Ju, not knowing what to do. Yin was confused and asked, "Commander, why do I have to drink milk?" This person was very calm and said, "Milk makes you taller." And he touched his chin and looked at Yin with a scrutinizing gaze. He nodded and replied, "Indeed, this young man is indeed a little short." Hua Yuxian smiled. "Young Master Xiao, Cloud Restaurant doesn't have milk. The Bifong wine is a little strong. I'm afraid this young master can't drink it. Ding Xiang, go and get the rose dew." Not long after, a young lady brought the rose dew. Once the rose dew was poured into the cup, it was a light red color that was completely different from the Bifong wine. Ian took a sip and could not help but be stunned. This wine was exactly the same as the sweet wine she tasted in Cloud Restaurant that year. And he also snatched a cup and took a sip. He frowned and said, "What is this? It's sweet like fruit juice." "This is rose dew. It's usually for the young ladies to drink." And he did not feel anything. He mocked Yin and said, "Muan Lang, did you hear that? This is for the young ladies. Are you still a man?" The speaker did not mean it, but the listener took it seriously. Yin was really speechless. Just as she was thinking of how to reply without being rude, Lin Shuanghe helped her out. Lin Shuanghe waved his fan and said calmly, "Yin Nangguang, you came to Cloud Restaurant when you were young. Now you're here again. Does your wife know about this?" Yin's expression changed. Lady Qingxiu values etiquette the most. Sir Xia also keeps himself clean. I'm afraid no one in the Xia family has ever been to a brothel. You're the exception. I wonder what Lady Qingxiu will think of you if she knows about this. Don't talk nonsense. Yin stuttered and retorted. However, this rebuttal was not imposing at all. Yin heard this and asked curiously, "Lady Qingxiu? Is she General Yan's wife?" She's Xia Chengxiu's eldest legitimate daughter of the Imperial College's chancellor. She's tender and gentle. There are many families in Shuo capital that want to recruit a beauty for their young masters. However, Yanangguang beat them to it. Lin Shuanghe laughed and teased. It said that heroes have a weakness for beauties. I heard that our general's Yin is very obedient to his wife in the Fu. She doesn't allow him to drink. When he socializes with his colleagues, he only drinks tea. He's really the model of a good and virtuous husband. Yin's face turned red. Lin Shuang, don't talk nonsense here. Oh, isn't that the case? Then when I return to Shuo capital, I'll have to ask your wife properly, he said. And he did not dare to say anything else. If Lin Shuanghe really confronted Xia Qingxiu, wouldn't that be a slap to his face? His gaze swept across the people at the table. He decided to take a different approach. He raised his ponytail and slammed the wine cup in front of him on the table. He said loudly, "What's wrong with listening to my wife? A real man knows when to yield and when not. Moreover, at least I have a wife. Do any of you have one? Do you? Everyone here, may I ask which one of you has a wife now?" Ian, he really did not know how to respond to this, and he drank the wine in front of him in one gulp. He did not know if it was because the Bifong wine was particularly intoxicating, but he was already drunk. He first asked Lin Shuanghe, "You hang out with women every day. All the women in the world are your little sisters. May I ask if you have a wife now?" Lin Shuanghe, "No," as if he had won a battle. He asked Yang Mingji with satisfaction, "You have a gentle temperament and great talent. Everyone says that scholars do not lack beautiful partners. Do you have a wife?" Yang Mingji, "No." And he became more and more excited. He looked at Chu Zhao. "You have." He suddenly paused and said to himself, "Your wife has already been decided. Forget it next." He asked Ian, "Little guy, do you have a wife?" Ian, "She really did not have a wife." And he turned to Xiao Ju and looked at her proudly. "You are the #1 in the Xianchang dojo. You have a handsome face and a good figure. No one can beat you in terms of both civil and martial arts." In those years, the door of the Xianchang dojo was almost broken by the girls. "But, may I ask if you have a wife?" Xiao Ju looked at him calmly. "I know you don't." And he single-handedly defeated everyone at the table. He probably thought that having a wife was a great honor, so he became even happier and prouder. He slammed the table, stood up, and said loudly, "It seems like all of you aren't that great. Do you know how amazing it is to have a wife? When you return home late at night, no one is waiting for you under the lamp, right? When you have a headache or fever, have you drunk the hot soup made by your wife? Don't even mention the clothes and boots that your wife personally sewed." Huh! He looked at everyone with disdain, as if he was the son of heaven looking down at the world. "Let's not talk about having a wife. I'm afraid that all of you have not even held a girl's hand in your life. You still have your first kiss." The more he spoke, the more ridiculous he became. He uncovered his face with his hands. He could not bear to look anymore. Yang Mingji could not help but tug at Yan He's robe. "Brother Nanguang, you are too much." When the girls who were pouring wine and playing the zither saw this, they could not help but laugh. They only felt that this arrogant young man had a kind of reckless cuteness at this moment. Kyle Yin smiled and said, "Young Master Yin, you are wrong. We're in the Cloud Dojo. If we're talking about girls, we do not lack anything. Young masters are so outstanding. If you really choose a girl in the dojo, everyone will be willing." Ian was so shocked that he almost dropped his cup. What was this? She was already recommending herself to be his pillow? No way. Absolutely not. Even though it was the Cloud Dojo, she had always treated the Cloud Dojo as a proper tavern. Just as she thought of this, she saw that the two beautiful girls beside Kyle Yin had already stuck to Xiao Ju. She really had good taste, picking the most outstanding one in one go. Ian's actions were faster than his thoughts. He instinctively shouted, "No way." The two girls who were about to persuade them to drink paused. The others at the table looked at her. Facing Xiao Ju's thoughtful gaze, Ian calmly said, "We came here in a group. We only drink, not talk about love." Hearing this, Hua Yuxian laughed even more happily. She poured herself a cup of Bifong wine and made a toast to Ian. "Young master is so cute. I toast you." Ian felt like a simple and honest scholar who had mistakenly entered the demon's cave. At this moment, he was really weak, pitiful, and helpless. After drinking a cup of rose dew, Kai Lian smiled and said, "Young masters, do you still remember that many years ago at this place, everyone sang and danced together?" She looked at Yin He. Young master, Yin even danced with a knife on the table. Yin He was stunned. "Why don't I remember?" It would have been better if he did not say this. Once he said it, Yin also remembered. At that time, after he helped Hua Yuxian chase away Tong Qiushi and scare Lu Rue away, everyone drank and celebrated at the Cloud Dojo. The girls in the Cloud Dojo played the zither and danced. It was very lively. Mama Ding took out the best Bifong wine to entertain them. And he drank the most and got drunk the fastest. After he was drunk, he took out a long knife and cut the lotus flower that was placed in the vase as a decoration in half. Everyone was shocked. Before they could stop him, they saw the exceptionally brightly dressed young man step on the table and start to dance with the knife. He danced and sang. There's a tree in the east. A dragon is placed below. I will cut off the dragon's legs and chew on the dragon's flesh. I will make it so that it will not return in the morning and will not rest in the night. His friends went to pull him and pulled him off the table. Lin Shuanghe covered his mouth and smiled apologetically to the girls beside him. This guy is drunk and spouting nonsense. Don't take it seriously. Sisters, please forget about it this time. Don't take it to heart. He turned around and scolded Yanhe. What dragon slaying? How dare you spout such disgraceful words? If your father knows, he will bring you back tomorrow and break your legs. Unfortunately, Yanhe was already completely drunk at that time. At that time, everyone was drunk. Lin Shuanghe recalled the past and sighed. Bifong wine is strong. Now that I think about it, other than Huaijin, He Rufei has the best alcohol tolerance and is the most sober. He Rufei? When Yanhe heard He Rufei, he felt uncomfortable. He scoffed. I think he secretly poured the wine away. I don't believe you if you say he has a good alcohol tolerance. He must have done something to it. Tian lowered her eyes and looked at the dark red wine in the wine cup in front of her. She thought to herself, that time, she really wasn't drunk. Even when everyone was unconscious, she was very sober and returned to her room, wearing her clothes and lying down. There was no other reason. It was because everyone was drinking Bifong wine at that time. She was the only one who drank rose dew like today. Rose dew was just like what Yanhe said. It was sweet fruit dew. Although it was considered wine, its alcohol tolerance was definitely not as good as Bifong wine. Moreover, she was extra cautious that day, so she drank very little. When everyone was lying on the floor, she was still standing. But why was she the only one who got rose dew back then? Tian could not understand. A girl played the pipa. The sound was light and cheerful. When he was young, he liked to watch tragedies on stage and listen to sad songs. He always felt that the joy of the world was not as unforgettable as the sadness. As he grew older, he strived for perfection in everything. However, he knew that perfection was difficult. All he wanted was an instant. Kyle Yin covered her mouth and laughed. Not only that, the young masters also left various scrolls of calligraphy in Yunlu. However, after a long time, those scrolls of calligraphy were lost. Otherwise, being able to take it out for a look today would be a joyous occasion. What's so great about scrolls of calligraphy? Yanhe did not think much of it. Just write another one. Our great scholar Yang is here. What can he write, right? Yang Mingji was stunned. He did not say anything. Hua Yuxian seemed to be touched by his words. She said, please wait. Then, she got up and left. Everyone did not know what she was going to do. After a while, the girl hugged a long scroll and walked to the side of everyone. Miss Yuxian, what is this? Lin Shuanghe asked. Hua Yuxian looked at the scroll in her arms. She touched it gently. Her eyes were filled with nostalgia. She said gently, I don't know if the young masters still remember that when we celebrated at Yunlu, young Master Wang was also there. Everyone fell silent. Young Master Wang was the cause of everything back then. He was also the end of everything. Ever since they reunited, everyone deliberately avoided talking about this person. They were afraid that Hua Yuxian would be sad, even though they did not know why. For a girl who was willing to sacrifice herself for her lover to break up so decisively, she must have encountered something very sad. When the young masters were drinking and talking, young Master Wang once drew on the side. He drew all of the young masters. As she spoke, she had the girl beside her help unroll the scroll. Later, I divorced young Master Wang. When I left the residence, I did not bring any luggage. I only had this. After she finished speaking, the scroll in her hand slowly unrolled. It fell into everyone's eyes. Wang Sheng did not need to be evaluated. His talent was not fake. The brush strokes captured the characteristics of each person very well. It was vivid and lifelike. On the scroll, lights intersected. Hu Qinsheng sang endlessly. The pretty girls' dresses were flipped up. Wine pots and cups were tilted at the long table. A young man with a high ponytail stepped on the table. He was in high spirits. He was practicing with his sword. There was a young man under the table. He held a folding fan in one hand and hurried to pull him up with the other. Yang Mingji beside him was not as steady as he was now. His expression was as gentle as ever. His sister beside him urged him to drink. He hurriedly waved his hand and refused. He also saw himself. The masked girl sat in the corner. Amidst the laughter and chatter, she seemed to have been forgotten. Her head was slightly tilted, as if she was following something. As far as her eyes could see, there was a white-robed youth sitting in the middle, casually drinking with his head lowered. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.